Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Hayes from Spiritist Group Love and Light in Newark, New Jersey. On behalf of the United States Spiritist Federation, I would like to welcome all of you to the 15th U.S. Spiritist Symposium. Our annual event used to be in a different city every year. This is the second year that the entire program will be in virtual. In 2022, God willing, we hope to meet again in person. It is a pleasure to welcome people all over the U.S. and other countries by joining us in this great celebration of the 160th anniversary of the Medium's book. Nothing better than talking about mediums and mediumship, right? And that is what we will learn about today and tomorrow. There are many different aspects to this theme. Please remember to submit your comments and questions during the presentation. We will have the opportunity to answer the questions at the Q&A session later today. And tomorrow, during the program called Spiritism, Ask Me Anything. But before we introduce our first speaker, let's say the initial prayer so we can start our day connected with the high spirits. Joao Korngold from the Spiritist Group of New York will do the initial prayer. Joao?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Let us all close our eyes, elevate our thoughts, try to connect with the spiritual benefactors, to unite ourselves in prayer, asking for their guidance, their blessing, their protection, so we can all share this enlightenment program, that we may all receive the assistance from them to be able to learn, understand, and more important, to put in practice on our daily lives all the teachings we're about to receive. We ask for the blessing and protection to all participants, to all speakers. We thank our Master Jesus for another opportunity of being reunited in His name, for His teachings and His guidances. United in prayer, with our hearts full of gratitude, we ask permission to start our symposium. So be it.
So be it. Thank you, Joao. And now, let's continue our program. How much do you know about mediumship? Have you ever wondered how this process really works? Let me introduce Susanna Korngold, who is going to talk about mediums and mediumship, the beginning. Susanna Korngold is currently the General Secretary of the International Spiritist Council and the President of the United States Spiritist Federation. She is the founder and president of the Spiritist Group of New York and the Spiritist Alliance for Books. She is an international speaker, a published author, and translator. Ms. Korngold works for Brazil Child Health and is also an executive member of the Women's Group of Brazil in New York. Susanna.
Hello, thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone. On behalf of the United States Spiritist Federation, we welcome you all. We are very happy to be able to be with you today to have our annual symposium. It's a virtual one, but it's still, there's so much that is going to be happening and everyone will be able to enjoy. And of course, because of the 160th anniversary of the celebration of the first launch of this Medium's book, we have decided to use this mediums and mediumship as the main theme of our symposium. And we thought that it would be very good for us to get to know a bit more about really how everything started. Of course, we understand and we know that for us to have a communication between the two worlds, we just require one incarnate and one discarnate. But how was exactly that everything came to place, and what is what people are talking about today, and how can this benefit us in order to continue with our work of dissemination of the Spiritist value? So recently, not a little less than 2 weeks ago, there was an article at the New Yorker that said, why did so many Victorians try to speak with the dead? That was the title of the article. Yeah, because as we know, the spiritualism is also known as Victorian spiritualism, modern spiritualism, Victorian spiritualism, because it basically all the phenomena happened during the Queen Victoria time, the United Kingdoms and the British Empire, all that. Although we have, of course, to mention, and we will, about everything that happened here in the US. So in this article, it started this way: it is a good time to be dead, at least if you want to keep in touch with the living. And it tells us that nowadays almost a third of Americans say that they have communicated with someone who has died, and collectively they spend $2 billion a year to get in touch with their loved ones, to know about the future, to know about things. And they even make a joke that whatever the medium, there is a medium, because they use Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. But when we talk about where everything will start brewing, so to say, in the late 19th century, there is an estimate that 4 million to 11 million people identified as a spiritualist in the United States alone, is completely in tune with what Allan Kardec presents to us in the Spiritist Review as well. He talks about the same numbers that we are having here. And we have great scientists participating, like the physicists Mary and Pierre Curie, the biologist Alfred Russel Wallace, the psychologist William James, Mark Twain, the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, and Queen Victoria. All of them attended seances. And at that time, during 4 decades, they imagined that we had a new book about spiritualism that was published roughly once a week. So once a week, we would, for 4 decades, we would have one publication of a book talking about the survival of the deaf. To quite understand the origins, it's something that it escapes us, but some of scholars, plenty of scholars actually, they say that everything started here in the US, in the New York stage. Others, like the novelist Arthur Conan Doyle, he says he goes far beyond. He looks at other countries. He expresses himself in saying that the most important occurrence in the history of the world since the Christ episode. For us to have an idea how important everything that was happening was to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, it was when he was engaged in his novels, the Sherlock Holmes, and he put a complete halt in those novels in order to dedicate himself to research and to publish over a dozen books related to this Spiritist phenomena. And he proposed the Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg and also the Scottish reformer Edward Irving as being some of the forerunners, which we in Spiritism also consider. We study them and others when we are talking and studying about the spiritualistic phenomena or the phenomena that we have in terms of communication. But most accounts that spiritualism didn't begin with great men or distant precedents. They say that they started with Little Women on an exact date, March 31st, 1848. And so this is what we are going to be seeing. Like we said, there are many reports that we have, and we have researched of spiritualist phenomena happening even before March 31st, 1848. But this was when everyone, the world start paying attention to it here in America, and then traveling to Europe and everything that happened after that. So that was the main point, the kickstart, so to say, for the spiritualist movement, like they say, modern spiritualism, Victorian spiritualism, and for us, is Spiritism. Andrew Jackson Davis was also crucial in everything that was happening. He was known as being the Poughkeepsie seer. And on this very same day, March 31st, 1848, he had a vision that he said, "About daylight this morning, a warm breathing passed over my face, and I heard a voice, tender and strong, saying, 'Brother, the good work has begun. Behold, a living demonstration is born.'" And it was here in this humbly placed Hydesville, New York, about 20 miles west of the rising town of Rochester, that everything started with the Fox family. Let's get to know a little bit about the Fox family. They moved to this farmhouse in Hydesville in December 11, 1847. The owner of the house heard that the house was haunted, but he didn't say anything, of course, to the new tenants. The father of the family, John Fox, actually his name was not even Fox, it was Voss, because he had a German origin, and he changed it in order to accommodate better to the United States. He was a blacksmith. He came from Canada. First, he had a farm there and lost it all. So the girls that we talk so much, the Fox sisters, the ones that initiated all that, they were not American. They were Canadian. They were born in Canada. And the thing is, we will find out that it's very hard to know precisely the dates where, especially Margaret Fox, Maggie, or Catherine Fox, Katie, they were born. So it runs from 1833 to 1837 and 1837 to 1839. I don't know whether they were trying to seem to be younger, but the thing is, we do not know. So there are different authors that place them in different dates of birth. But it was, like we said, in March 31st that everything started. They already in February, they started hearing some rapping sounds. It continued on the end of March, but it was only on March 31st that the phenomena was happening all over, and they were really frightened about everything that was happening. And we established this date as being the one that was crucial for everything, because, like we said, the phenomena start happening. They woke up their parents. They went to look for neighbors to go there and to witness everything that was happening as well. For us to have an idea, at the end of the night, there were over 100 people assembled around the house to witness the phenomena. And they started establishing communication with them. It was later on that a neighbor, actually, of the Fox family had the idea of placing ladders so the communication would be easier. And everything was happening in this way. And sometimes it comes to our mind the question, why was it so easy for people to understand, at least in that neighborhood, to accept? And the what we have is that it seemed that the Wayne County, where they lived, were no strangers to new religious claims. They witnessed the appearance of the Shakers, the Mormonism, and even the prophecies of the Millerites. So there was, everything was happening, and Kardec in the Spiritist Review, there is one of the articles that he mentions that the ambience was very inviting here in the U.S. because it was a place that people would be accepting new things, and this is what was happening. We know that the spirit that was communicating, at first they gave him the name Mr. Splitfoot. Later on, with the communication, he told his story that he was a peddler. He was murdered about 5 years previous to that time. And he said that he was buried in the house. And so they start digging. They start looking for it in the following day. They couldn't find anything. They started again in the summer because there was a flood that prevented them to do this. And they found human hair and bones, but not much. And for us to be aware that this missing skeleton of Charles B. Rosma was only found in 1904, or 56 years later, when the whole family, the Fox sisters, the parents were already dead, and it fell down one of the walls. They found the complete human skeleton, and they found the peddler's tin box that today can be seen in the Museum of Lilydale. But it's important for us to get to know a little bit about our main protagonists, the Fox sisters. Who were they, and how was that, from the simple phenomena that was happening in a small area, in a small village, traveled the U.S. and then the world. So let's start with the older sister, Anna Leah Fox, and mostly referred to as Leah. She was born in 1813, married at the age of 14. The husband abandoned her. She had a daughter, Lizzie, and they were at the time living in poverty. After she remarried a man named Calvin Brown, he died a couple of years later. One interesting thing about Leah is that when she heard about the phenomena, she was not even there. She came the following days to see what was happening in the family house. And immediately she realized that could be a good source of income for the whole family. And with time, and the more she developed this idea, she was the one that changed the name sittings to séance, because she thought that a French word would be more enticing to invite people to come and to participate. She also later married a wealth banker, Daniel Underhill, and this is a picture that we don't see that often. It's not so easy to find about of her and her husband. And she died in 1890, when she was 77, and she was at this time estranged with both her sisters that didn't even go to her funeral. And we will be talking about it a little more along our presentation today. Now we're just trying to show you a little bit about their stories there, and then we will put all of that together. So Margareta was then married to a man named Elisha Kane. He didn't believe at all in spiritualism. He thought that they were being abused by their sisters, because immediately Leah, because like we said, she saw that this could be a very profitable thing for them, for the whole family. She started basically exploring the two sisters to charge for people to witness the phenomena, for private seances, etc. And so when Margaret met Elisha Kane, he thought that they were only being abused and wanted to break her from the group, which he did for a certain time. But in 1856, he had to to travel for one of this exploration travel. And it is said, because it's not something that we have any proof, that she married him in a clandestine ceremony, but his family never accepted that. And the following year, 1857, he died, and then she returned to her activities as mediums. She converted to Catholicism, then returned to spiritualism. But the thing is, she needed the means to continue living, and so she returned to her mediumistic practices. In 1976, she joined Caddy in England at the end of her life, and she died in her mid 50s. She was deep in alcoholism and living in a house here in New York City, very close to where I am now talking to you, and about 2 blocks away from the Spiritist group of New York. So whether this is a coincidence or not, but that was where Maggie spent quite some time, until when she was really bad, a friend of hers took her to Brooklyn, and she died there. Catherine Fox, the younger sister, at that time, Cathy was about, let's say, average 9 years old, okay, because it goes from 8 to 11, but most probably it was about 9 years old. They were becoming so famous, having all these public seances, attracting so many people. So she was like completely out of any kind of reality of her time. And she also needed a sponsor, because, like we said, the family was very poor. Just having, the seances were not enough. So she was invited to live here in New York with the editor of the New York Tribune, a very devout spiritualist, to live with him and his wife. They had lost a child, and so they wanted her to be in contact with this child. So basically, she was trading an education and a place to live with her mediumistic capabilities. So she was not happy, and as soon as she got a little old, she left the house and started, she got back to the stage and started working as a medium. Katie was a phenomenal medium. Her mediumship is, from what we read from all the authors, the way they describe newspaper, she was really incredible in terms of her possibilities. She had, automatic writing simultaneously while she was giving, a transcommunication as well. A really celebrity medium, so to say. And many times she was engaged by rich people to be exclusive mediums for them, trying to get in touch with their family members. Like here, we see this banker Livermore that hired her and to get in touch with his late wife Stowe. And for a period of 5 years, Kate gave him nearly 400 sittings with detailed records kept. And one extraordinary that we have is that she was able of gradually materialize Estelle while still retaining some conscious. So she was, the three of them had mediumship. Leah started a bit later, but she also was capable of doing some phenomena. Margareta, she was also very capable, but Katie was the one that had more possibilities in terms of mediumship. However, she started very much like her sister Margareta. She started drinking excessively. Even when she went to treatment, was very difficult for her to keep away from drinking, which is something that we understand quite well when we talk about spiritism and mediums of physical phenomena, that if they are not well assisted by a group of committed and serious people, if they abuse their possibilities using excessively their ectoplasm, they will need something to replenish this vital energy. And of course, this would not be one that we would indicate, but certain things like drinking too much, eating too much, and other things would help in this energization, so to say, and so they would be feeling a little better. Of course, this is a topic for another lecture, but we can find it in details in a work that's called Trilhas da Libertação of Divaldo Pereira Franco, one of the books that it gives us in details why so many mediums of physical manifestations wind up drinking excessively as well. She also gave sittings to this anti-slavery activist, Harriet Beecher Stowe, the one that wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it was when in 1971 she finally went as a missionary to England. There she met her husband, her future husband, Henry Dietrich Jenkin. She had 2 boys. And when he died, she returned with her 2 boys to the U.S. But in the meantime, while she was in England, she was working with Sir William Crookes. She held joint sittings with Daniel Douglas Home, Agnes Gutt Volkmann. And later, she even traveled. She was invited to visit Russia to meet Alexander Aksakov. All those incredible researchers and workers of spiritualism at that time that were really trying to prove the phenomena. So sometimes, while researching for all of that, I was just imagining having the opportunity of being with all these people. And people that made a difference and that brought so much to the world, not only in terms of the academia of their own profession, but also related to spiritualism as well. And of course, Spiritism. She also died here in New York, not close from where I'm talking to you right now, of a heart attack in her early 50s. And we will be talking a little bit more later when I'm going to be putting the 3 sisters together. But let's talk about where everything started to become publicized. It was exactly in the city of Rochester. Rochester at that time, as they say, was a hotbed of free thinking. It was where the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, in 1847, gave talks, founded the abolitionist paper. It was also where we had the Women's Rights Convention, and where the American female suffrage movement also had its cradles. And also many religious free thinkers like the Quakers, the Swedenborgians, and others were going there and presenting themselves there. Here are 2 ladies that we should get to know better, especially Elizabeth Caddy Stanton. She was an American feminist, and she was present at this Seneca Falls Convention, and they were commonly seen by this 2 women, Leah and Maggie. They had private seances with them, and it's really worth for us to read a bit more about this history and to understand more how everything, feminism, abolitionism, religious new thinkings, everything started intertwining, and everything happening in this city here in New York, Rochester. So it was there that Leah chose to have the first public meeting where they would be presenting themselves. At that point, because they were already suffering, some kind of persecution, it was only Leah and Maggie, because Katie was in another city with her mom. So November 14, 1849, in the city of Rochester, at Corinthian Hall, it was when they came for the first time to make this public demonstration. 250 people were attending that. But of course, there were so many skeptical people there. And they required that they were going to, the sisters should be investigated. They put together a group of people, a committee to investigate them. They did that, but the report was they couldn't find any kind of hoax, that no fault at all in terms of everything that was happening. But the things continue, because they were there from November 14 to November 17. So during this time, there was 3 different committees that were put together to try to identify any kind of fraud, and the answer was always the same. And the consequence was always that the public was not happy with what was going on. They wanted them to be proved of fraud. And many times they had to leave the place under police protection. The second day, that was November 15, 400 people came. So they were skeptical, but at the same time, they wanted to be there. They wanted to know what was going on. They put together another committee. And in this time, it was when they invited the Supreme Court Justice, John Edmunds, that was later became a very important name in early spiritualism, Judge Edmunds, to participate as well. And the result was the same. They say, we could not find any kind of fraud. It was really horrible, everything that they did with them in order to find whether this was a fraud or not, what they were submitted. Maggie, because Katie, like I told you, was not there during these presentations, she went to horrible things for a girl of her age and for a woman at that time. So it's not difficult for us to imagine how traumatized she became with all that, and with all that she had to endure, and all the accusations and all other examinations coming. And here, even in this picture, we see a doctor holding their knees. At that time, a man could not touch a woman, could not touch her knees. That was outrageous for a woman, And again, nothing. They could prove nothing. And let's see what William James, a founding member of the American Society for Psychical Research, he says, if you wish to upset the law that all crowns are black, you must seek to show that no crowns are. It is enough if you prove one single crown to be white. So this is what we see when we look at for those famous people, researchers, and he was a researcher. He was researching all the time Mrs. Eleanor Piper, that he calls his white crown, because he could see that the phenomena was real. But over and over, regardless of how many times they were proving that there was no fake, people still refused to accept. But of course, they became professional mediums, start giving, seances for monetary giving, touring around the country, the cities close to them, the country. Many times their lives were threatened. Then they were discovered by this editor of New York Tribune, Horace Greeley, which is the one that Katie lived with and his wife for a while. And just for us to have an idea of the power of those mediums, especially Katie, there was one demonstration that this Governor Talmadge, he was levitated on top of a table that levitated as well. What is important for us to understand when we are talking about professional mediums is that at that time, a gal their age, working 12 hours a day, would earn in a factory about $3.50 a week. Leah was charging $50 to $100 a day, thinking, and sometimes she would even send one sister to one house and another sister to the other house, to other city, just to make double of she wanted to make. So as we can see, years of public mediumship in a hostile atmosphere, the drain of too frequent sittings on their energy, the commercial exploitation of their talents, and the absence of understanding regarding the religious implications of spiritualism combined to produce a deteriorating influence. So, I mean, they were not there for, to understand what was really happening. They were just using the phenomena. Of course, it possibilitate that everyone started paying attention to this communication between the two worlds. But they were not gathering really instructions, learning the way we try to do it today, which is the main purpose of Spiritism. Is not necessarily the communication, but what we can gather from that. And they were completely abused in this sense, to the point that in 1888, especially Maggie, not being capable of withstanding there anymore, she declared, she announced that everything was a fake. And when she did that, Katie was in the audience. Later on, she would say that she regarded spiritualism as being one of the greatest curses that the world has ever known. But the following year, Maggie repented, and she said that that was not honest. She gathered a large group of people in a New York theater to make this announcement that she was pushed somehow to say that everything was a fake. And when she was making this statement, another series of physical effects start happening in the full hall. So this retraction was later published in a Light and New Press newspaper, where we read all about. So overall, they would spend 6 hours a day giving seances. Sometimes they went out at night to give more at private residences. They had no time for themselves. It was all work, no childhood play. There was no time for parties, games, and fun. If that was not enough, they endured examinations by physicians and critics who strip searched them, looking for bodily explanations or external assistance, and were attacked by mobs of Christians and secular skeptics alike, who threatened them even with guns. They proved nothing and continue persecuting them their whole life. So this is where we should be thinking about how difficult it was for them to pave the way. You know, sometimes not knowing exactly what was happening, we commonly forget how young they were when everything started. We forget how much Leah, the older sister, had imposed them a rhythm of work that was inhumane. You know, to work all this time, to be in a trance, to be donating your ectoplasm, your vital fluid, all of that, the way that they were exposed. At the same time, we may say, oh, they had a glamorous life, in many places of the society, but at the same time, they were feared. They were accused of being witches. They were hurt by the mob, like we said before. I mean, all of that was just too much for them. I mean, if nowadays sometimes it's hard for us to come and tell people about our beliefs because they are not the common beliefs sometimes, imagine for them, something. And I mean, with women, such young age, how difficult it was for all of them to go through that. No wonder why, they started driving each time more to alcohol and all that. And I mean, in a self-destructive path. That's what we see. And why have they done that? It was so offensive. This is a question that we have, and we have to ask ourselves, because the only thing that they did was to demonstrate that death does not exist. They showed that there was a way to bridge the two worlds, and these were their themes, right? This is what was happening. Why people had to be so much after them, criticizing and abusing them. Regardless of all that, they have paved the way to all the spiritualist movement in the world. To Spiritism, it was crucial, for it finds its origin in it. The unknown and feared phenomenon gained form and was methodically researched to become the new spiritual science, a philosophy of light, and established a risen faith based on the teachings of Jesus. So it was when, in 1852, the first American missionaries of the modern spiritualism left to Scotland and England. The ship Washington departs from New York to the port of Bremen, taking mediums, books, brochures, and gazettes, and the press announces for the first time the arrival of the movement in Europe on April 1853. And then, as we know, the rest is history. Then Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivail, the professor, start getting in touch with the phenomena brought to France by Delphine Desjardins, and she started working with the turning tables, introduced the turning tables to Victor Hugo. And then when we know that finally in 1855, when Kardec witnessed for the first time one seance, he knew that there was so much more behind all that phenomena that so far was striking our senses, becoming just an entertainment, a way of communicating or communication between the two worlds. But he put everything in place, and he codified the Spirit's book. And today that we celebrate the 160th anniversary of the Medium's book, everything is started with these little girls. And I would like our last note to be of thinking about them, of honoring them and understanding the difficulties that they had to go through. And hopefully they will come back and find much better ways to continue in this journey of spirituality. And now we would like you as well to invite you to continue with us in this journey, exploring and learning about mediums and mediumship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanna, for that very engaging and informative presentation. It is a very moving tribute. We will take a short break to stretch a little and give our brain a little break too, to get ready for more information in the next block. While we are on break, please give us some of your attention for the announcements that are coming up. Stay tuned. If you are looking for some books on Spiritism, please check out the website of the United States Spiritist Federation bookstore at www.spiritusbooks.us. Browse it and get your books on this user-friendly website. There are always some new arrivals, books in English and some in Portuguese, plus Spiritist magazines and books for children. And just in time for this great celebration of the 160th anniversary of the Medium's book, the United States Spiritist Federation announces the release of the Medium's book to be coming soon. It will be available in the USSF bookstore at www.spiritistbooks.us. Every year, during the U.S. Spiritist Symposium, we get to learn more about the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association. For those who are not familiar with the SMA, its mission is to support spiritual care as a complementary therapy to the conventional approach in clinical practice. To learn more, please visit the SMA website at www.sma-us.org. SMA is announcing their second virtual Congress that will take place on November 20th and 21st. This event will be broadcast in 5 languages: English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and German. Save the date. Spread the news. Please follow event announcements at their website and on Facebook. Check out this website for FIXI. That stands for Family, Youth, and Children Spiritist Education. This is a relatively new department within the United States Spiritist Federation. Browse the website for more information. See how Spiritist groups all over the U.S. are collaborating to provide more resources that focus on the unique needs of teaching Spiritism to children, youth, and families, plus skills needed to understand and apply the principles of Spiritism to our family life. This is for educators, for parents, and for the kids. Get information on youth events, share with your groups, interact with the U.S. Spiritist Federation by asking questions and sending in your comments. And speaking of family, youth, and children, not to mention all kids from ages 0 to 99, please do not miss this great event next month on July 10th and 11th. This will be the 18th year of the Family Spiritist Retreat organized by the Tri-State Spiritist Federation in collaboration with the United States Spiritist Federation. Last year, it was all virtual. This year, we will have the opportunity of participating both virtually and in person. But here is what's new. The invitation to do in-person activities outdoors has been extended to different Spiritist groups in many different states. There will be one in California, one in Texas, Florida, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Illinois, and so forth. See more details on the website. Little by little, we are resuming this fraternal contact in person. Register now, as in immediately. It is free. It is fun. Check it out. And now, let's watch a video inviting us to this event. In a partnership with the International Spiritist Council, CEI, the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas has made available the Spirits book and now is releasing the Mediums book in audiobooks, all for free. Go to the YouTube channels or website of the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, or the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas, and use your time in a very useful way learning about Spiritism. Due to the long period of time it takes to organize a big event like the Worldwide Spiritist Congress, there has been a change of plans for 2022. Its virtual debut will be on October 15 and 16, 2022, and it will be organized by the Union Spiritus Français et Francophonique in collaboration with the International Spiritist Council. For more information, please follow the updates at www.10cem.com. Join us every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time to watch the talk series that is organized by the United States Spiritist Federation with special guests from many states within the U.S. and different countries who talk about different themes on Spiritism. These talks are in English. You can watch at the Facebook page or the YouTube channel on the USSF. Participate, ask questions, send your comments, an interactive way to learn more about Spiritism. In the past 5 years, the United States Spiritist Federation has published more than 30 Spiritist books in English. There's a lot more to do, and the resources got scarcer during these difficult times. But you, as an individual or your Spiritist center, can make a difference and help in the dissemination of Spiritism in English. Use this QR code on the screen now and send your donation for the publication of the series of 6 books by Teresinha de Oliveira and other titles. Be part of the solution. Follow the United States Spiritist Federation on social media and get all the information you need to learn about all the events by the USSF. It is on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. If you want to be informed about all that is going on, please subscribe at our website at www.spiritus.us. Welcome back. If you are joining us just now, welcome. We will continue our 15th U.S. Spiritist Symposium with the roundtable discussion about mediums and mediumship, abilities and responsibilities. Have you ever thought about mediumship as an act of love? What are the do's and don'ts in the practice of mediumship explained directly by the spirits and presented in the Medium's book? Make sure to send your questions to the panel. After this discussion, your questions can be replied to at the Q&A session that will follow after the break. Let's introduce the moderator of this panel. Marcia Tragiano is one of the founders of the Christian Spiritist community of Atlanta and a former board member of the United States Spiritist Federation. She is a Spiritist for more than 20 years and has been giving talks and leading study groups in English and Portuguese. With a master's degree in management of technology and a professional certification in project management, Marcia currently works in the field of project management. And now, our three speakers. Dan Assisi is an award-winning author and internationally celebrated speaker who has delivered hundreds of talks at conferences on spirituality. Known for a mix of deep thinking and witty humor, Dan takes a unique approach to spirituality that is steeped in reason to remind audiences everywhere of our spiritual nature. He is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute and of the California Spiritist Association. You can also find him as the host of the Spiritist Conversations podcast. Susanna Simoes is an active worker of the Spiritist movement. Dr. Simoes spends her time between her professional work as a doctor of physical therapy, her family, and the dissemination of Spiritism. Susanna has worked as a member of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and the United States Spiritist Federation. She is one of the founders of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in Miami, where she works primarily overseeing the work in English. She is an active speaker in the U.S. and abroad. Flavio Zanetti has worked for the board of directors of the Allan Kardec Society of Massachusetts in different positions. He acted as the program's director for the United States Spiritist Council and more recently helped found the Spiritist Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to disseminating Spiritism in English. He also contributes as a translator of printed Spiritist materials and was simultaneous translation for Spiritist events nationwide. Professionally, he is an engineering manager working for a multinational telecommunications company. Welcome.
Thank you, Peter. As we know, we began our program earlier today with a focus on the beginnings of mediums and mediumship. Josara Corngold gave us such a beautiful presentation. Thank you. And joining me in this roundtable discussion, Dan, Flavio, and Susanna are going to talk a little bit about abilities and responsibilities of mediums. Thank you so much, Dan, Flavio, and Susanna, for joining me. And as we start talking about, we pose upon questions, so many questions about mediums, about mediumship, and we do understand it is an act of love. Mediums, as we know, are instruments of the spirituality because they become the conduit of messages from the spiritual to our world. We also know mediumship has always existed. And again, as highlighted by Jusada, in Kardec's time, those physical manifestations were commonly used to call attention to the phenomenon. But before we keep moving on that, I wanted us to pause and with this panel, talk a little bit about mediumship. How about we start by specifically talking about mediumship and types of mediumship? Flavio, can you tell us about mediumship?
Sure. How much time do we got? No, just kidding. So, Marcia, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to join a very esteemed panel of very knowledgeable folks. I'm here trying to contribute a little bit to this to the event, which, by the way, started very well. Thank you, Jusara, for spending a good chunk of time talking to us about the Fox sisters and how important they were to the spiritualist movement and to mediumship overall. I believe, Marcia, it's important for us to define what mediumship is. And again, the whole word mediumship, right? Allan Kardec, the compiler of Spiritism, was the one that created the word mediumship, right? And him in the book called What is Spiritism, he defines mediumship as three important things, right? First one, if my memory works here, it's a gift from God that everyone has, since it's an attribute of us spirits, meaning some of us have it more advanced than others, but ultimately, right, it's the ability that we have to communicate with the discarnates or the spiritual world. Of course, it can be employed for good or for evil, right? Hence the importance for us to understand its characteristics and outcomes very well. So basically, the idea of mediumship is a faculty or an ability that puts us in direct contact with discarnate spirits and the spiritual world. There are many authors in the Spiritist movement that talk about it. There are authors that describe with a great extent the abilities, the types, and the considerations that we have to take. And there's one in particular that I like a lot, Spirit Guide Emmanuel, that he suggests, or he argues that it's one of the most beautiful opportunities for progress and redemption. That's why it's critically important for us to know how to use it well, and how to make the most out of it. Does that help, Marcia?
Yes, absolutely. This is very good, and love to hear more about the Spirit Guide and author Emmanuel later. But I was wondering, Susanna, as we keep talking about mediumships and types of mediumships, can you maybe talk a little bit about the physical manifestation, those mediums that focus on physical manifestations?
Yes. Hello, Marcia. Hello, panel. It's nice to be here with you guys again. And hello to everyone who is participating with us today at the US Symposium. It's so nice to be here, especially after Josiah's talk. Very inspiring. And just answering this question and expanding on the topic, right? Josiah did mention about, with the sisters Fox at the time, you can imagine how people probably wonder if that home was like haunted and, with physical manifestations. When we study the Medium's book, and we will see that Kardec, the spirits, they have divided mediumship into physical phenomena and intelligent phenomena. So the physical phenomena is all these effects that can be perceived by our senses. And they include, these haunted places, noises, cracks, and objects. They're being moved, transported from one place to another, and many different other type of effects. And so it's like, it's something that can be scary if you don't really understand what's happening. It can be like a wow, what's going on here. So it is very impressive, and actually has a specific purpose of like calling our attention to, hey, there's something there, because behind the physical phenomena, there is an intelligence. So it's not just a noise. It's not just a table moving. These objects are giving intelligent information. They actually make sense. Since they don't have a brain, it must have a intelligence behind the phenomena. But, since this is a symposium where we are honoring the medium's book, I really would like to bring our attention to the second part of the medium's book, chapters 1 to 7, 6 to 7. It's amazing. It's really amazing what the spirits and Kardec do in terms of explaining the phenomena to the greatest extent possible at the time, because as it's written there are some laws that are still unknown to us, so we can't really understand entirely. And the explanation that the spirits give to Kardec is so amazing that Kardec himself is going to say something like, oh my God, this is so incredibly different than the theory that I had created and what I was imagining that could explain this phenomenon. So I think that for the audience who is listening to us today, I would like to give, like in a nutshell, if I can, just a very brief explanation of how this phenomena is produced, because I think that that's the beauty of Spiritism, and that's the beauty of mediumship with Spiritism. So prior to Spiritism, mediumship has always existed. But what Spiritism does is take away all the mysticism, take away all the fantasy and misunderstandings about the phenomena. So we understand that, there is this primary element in the universe that's called the universal cosmic fluid that gives rise to all material phenomena. And we understand that the vital principle, which is the principle that actually give things life, as well as the pure spirit, which is our spiritual body, they come from this universal cosmic fluid. And this is important for us to understand, because as we read this book, it's written there that these elements are the key for the understanding of the phenomena. So when we see things moving, what happens? How is that possible? Are the spirits pushing, pulling? Are they knocking with a hammer on the wood to make it crack? And what we learn is that it's actually none of that. So what happens is the spirits who are immaterial, they need a means to be able to manipulate these objects. So what they will do is they will use some of their own fluid from their perispirit, from their spiritual body, which is semi-material, but they also need the fluid of the medium. Now, those are special types of mediums. They have the ability to emanate what we call animalized fluid, or later was called ectoplasm, from their own spiritual body, from their own cells. And so what the spirits will do is they will combine those fluids, their own fluid, and the fluid from the medium, they are going to surround the object. There's a whole preparation for the phenomena where they actually surround the object with those fluids, and the fluid will permeate the object in such a way that the object becomes shortly alive, if you will. And then with that fluid in the object, they now can use their own will, their own touch to move the object around. So it's what I'm talking here is very complex, and I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. But it's really, really incredible. And I'm sharing this because I hope that people get curious about understanding mediumship and actually appreciating the complexity of the phenomena and the amazing work of Kardec in the Medium's book. Kardec himself is like, what are you telling me? But I see spirits, we see spirits here actually playing the piano and they're using their hands, and you're telling me that they are not actually doing that? And the spirit says, no, they're not actually doing that. Those spirits who are not as aware, not as elevated, they are actually still very connected to the material realm, and sometimes they themselves don't understand how they're producing the phenomena. They actually think that the piano is being played by their hands hitting the key as they did when they were incarnated. But that's actually not how it works. So this is one aspect of mediumship, and this is one type of mediumship that we see in the Medium's book that, like I said, it does require a very special type of medium with special faculties. It is also in the Medium's book written there that those mediums, you know, we all have our perispirits connected to our physical bodies, but there's actually levels in which this perispirit is more or less attached. And so they have a special composition that allows for this extensive donation of fluid that contributes to the process. Another interesting fact, just closing up, is that some of these mediums are fully aware of their mediumship and they're actually able to contribute to the process actively, and some of them are completely unaware. So it's also wild to think that you can actually be used by the spirits who are taking that energy from you and being completely unaware of your power and possibility to contribute to the phenomenon. All that and so much more, because the spirits in all these different chapters are going to describe in depth and in detail different phenomena such as transportation, the tables and wraps, and so forth. So it's pretty amazing to read these first chapters of the Medium's book.
Thank you, Susanna, so much. And I'd love to call Dan to maybe talk a little bit about you focused on the physical manifestation, the intelligent manifestation. But may I ask Flavio back to the round table? Flavio, you piqued my interest, and Susanna mentioned, right, that her call to action is to as we talk about mediumship and Kardec's Medium's book, right? The call to action is to make us curious, get us curious, so that we can appreciate the phenomenon and all that happens. And you mentioned earlier, Flavio, I don't know if you're okay with me calling on you, that Emmanuel discussed the ability to use mediumship, this capability, right, to really push us toward our own progress as a very beautiful ability. Do you mind talking a little bit about it, and then we'll go to Dan?
Sure. Happy
Thank you.
Marcia. Yeah, no problem. So let's take a step back, right? So Susanna went really well when she mentioned she defined overall mediumship. And for those folks that are joining us that don't have a lot of knowledge about mediumship, right? Today, it's a lot more common, knowledge everywhere. We open up Netflix, there's mediumship series there. We open up all of media, and there's a lot of stuff around mediumship. So basically, it's this cooperation or communication between incarnate and discarnate spirits that take place. That is mediumship, right? That's what we define as mediumship. What Emmanuel talked about, right, is that this should always be towards the service of comforting and enlightenment. And you may be asking the question, how do we do that? I mean, what is he referring to, right? So certainly the gospel should always be the basis for all and any mediumistic practice, because it gives us the important guidelines in order to do so. Let me explain that, right? So when we talk about charity, when we talk about assisting others, that should all be our goals in life. And even more so with mediumship. Never self-promoting, never making mediumship as a profession. That's what we learn through Spiritism. When Emmanuel, again, talks about the vehicle for enlightenment of the soul, right? It's a very beneficial tool that those who are working towards, all of us, right, who are working towards our evolutionary path needs to take place, needs to really abide by. How is that even important to us? How is it, how do I use mediumship for my own benefit, for my own enlightenment? How do I use mediumship so I can really become better, a better spirit, a better person? Because every time we practice mediumship well and through the guidelines that Spiritism, tells us or teaches us, we are ultimately practicing the law of love, charity. We are helping. Once again, we are assisting those who are in need. And every time we go towards those who are in need, every time we extend our hands to those that are suffering, to those that need some help, guess what? As we learn from the gospel, from the scriptures as well, and from Jesus himself, that we are marching towards God. And every time that we march towards God, right, we achieve happiness. We help others. We also benefit from doing that. That being said, Allan Kardec himself, once again, the compiler of Spiritism in the Medium's book, affirms that the most sublime expressions of brotherhood, of fraternity, always flourish under Jesus' inspirations. And that's what Emmanuel is trying to say as well. Every time we use mediumship for its original purpose, for its evolved purpose, we achieve, or we'll take a step forward towards our own enlightenment and evolution. That's what Emmanuel is trying to say. That's what we learn from Medium's book as well, Marcia.
Awesome explanation. Thank you for adding to that. And Dan, do you mind, as we talk about mediumship, abilities, and their responsibility, a little bit about intelligent manifestation? So, Susanna, thank you, Susanna, for talking about the complexities behind what we call the manifestation, the physical manifestations, right? There are other types of manifestations, the types of mediumship. And Dan, if you could maybe discuss with us during this roundtable, what are those, and what can you add to this discussion?
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you guys. Hi to everybody watching. I love that we're coming together to celebrate 160 years of this incredible book, the first treatise ever written about mediumship. And I love that Flavio helped us define what mediumship is, right? This act of being an intermediary between both planes of life. And I love that we had Susanna talk to us about how Kardec also, from a framework perspective, try to help us better understand what mediumship was about when he created two topical categories, so to speak, like, physical effects, like Susanna was saying, and intellectual effects. And I think Susanna did a brilliant job of telling us about physical effects and how it pertains to our senses. And I think, of course, we want to talk a little bit about intellectual effects as well. And those are the effects that, to use some of Susanna's words, that we cannot see, right? So we're talking about communications and interactions with the spiritual world that don't necessarily speak to moving objects or creating sounds, but instead they produce mental or emotional impacts. And so in that area, which is an area that we are more concerned with these days in Spiritism, mainly because once we understood what mediumship was in the beginning, and we understood that the physical effects that were taking place at the time were obviously calling our attention to this fact that there was this interaction with the spiritual realm, right? The turning tables and objects moving around in the 1800s were really a way for the spirits to call our attention. But once we understood that, and we were able to develop mediumship a little, our understanding of mediumship a little bit more, when we're able to really kind of proceed into the realm of intellectual mediumship, that is to say, when we're able to exchange ideas and not just observe phenomena, the world opened up to us. It really did, right? We began to have these conversations and have these messages from the beyond that were not about just moving things to catch your attention, but what really providing us with insights on how the spiritual world works and how is it that we can leverage that to improve our lives and how perhaps we should behave differently. And so in that realm of intellectual, communications or mediumship, we have advanced quite a bit into all different kinds of approaches. Sometimes in Spiritism, we talk about psychography, for instance, which is the act of a medium, connecting with the spiritual realm and then writing down those messages. And we have hundreds, if not thousands, of books that have come forth from that effort that bring us a lot of knowledge and bring us a lot of certainty to our hearts. So that would, for instance, be a type of mediumship that we would place in the intellectual phenomena kind, along with what was also called psychophony, right? So psychophony in general is the same thing. You have the psych prefix in there, right? Phony being talking. So the ability to give voice to the spirits, act as a channel for their idea through vocal means, which is something that we also use quite a bit in Spiritism, obviously to also provide some enlightening messages to those who are listening. But we do quite a bit of that too when we are in our rescue groups, when we're doing some work that is really directed to counseling and helping spirits and incarnates, and we can talk a little bit more about that. So those are two main examples, for instance, that we use quite a bit in Spiritism today, psychophony and psychography, that kind of fall into that intellectual realm, right? So it's not that we have stopped doing physical realm or paying attention to it. We still think it's very interesting. But because we already understand how mediumship work, and that's in great part because of this wonderful book that we're talking about, the Medium's book that Susanna kind of whet our appetite to, because we understand how that worked, we really began to take a step towards how does that impact and influence my life? And that follows more in the realm of intellectual mediumship. And so it's a natural progression that we've seen through our Spiritist history to go from physical effects and start paying more attention to intellectual effects, because that gives us more food for thought to kind of operate on the world and on ourselves to become better people.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dan. And it's if you think about it, right? Flavio mentioned mediumship. What is mediumship? If you turn on Netflix, what do you see? You see movie series that are really omnipresent. If you go to, let's say, the old-fashioned thing called library, and you just pick a book, maybe there's a reference to that, and it's just for food for thought. How many of movies or books, beyond being the subject of mediumship, they're also inspired by spirits, hence, as you mentioned, Dan, a psychograph, right? There was a influence. So as we talk about it, we come to the notion that we are all mediums.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
We're all somehow subject. And I call you, Susanna, when you said, as you're talking about physical manifestation, you mentioned some people are really unaware they're able to do that. And this is with physical, right? But when we start talking about intellectual, it's even more interesting, where that influence comes to our lives and we're able to write books, and we hear many times where an author would take, Dan, you can talk about it, a year off or 6 months to the craft of writing, and all of a sudden their lifelong careers, they can write a book in 2 weeks, right? That flow of idea that comes most likely inspired by our spiritual guides, etc. But as we say, we are here, we are all subject to that influence of the spirits. And if we start thinking about it, right, the assumption is that we somehow can or should be able to develop our abilities, our mediumship, right? Because why? Because we want to communicate, because maybe we want to be that conduit for higher intelligence than maybe we are, or that we want to talk to our family members. And I wanted to pause here and hear from you. And Dan, I'm going to ask you to maybe speak about it first. Can you discuss Netflix? Broad, right? Global. When you talk about books, fictional movies, very general. But how do spiritists specifically see mediumship? What are maybe some of the things that are so peculiar about mediumship from a spiritist point of view? And maybe one of the things that I got really curious, if anyone here was able to see what Jusada talked about with the Fox sisters and a lot of the issues that they suffered from fraudulent investigations for fraud and charging, et cetera, why we're really should not be charging for that. Dan, can you talk to us about it?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic topic in general,
Thank
right?
you.
Because we know that mediumship is not the domain of spiritists only, right? I think Josiah made a great point that we saw mediumship even before there was spiritism. Right, so we have seen it throughout history. We have seen people engaging in this act in many different ways. They were called high priests or shamans, right, or prophets, or oracles. There has always been mediumship. I think what we're celebrating here today is a milestone in that history of the world, which is the Medium's book, because it really helped us understand for the first time in a democratic way, right, to this book that Kardec brought, how mediumship happens and how we can develop mediumship and understand mediumship. So I think that Spiritism's contribution to mediumship is huge, because we started from mediumship. Like the DNA of Spiritism is one of inquiry, and is one that is based on mediumship, on understanding this phenomena that first happened through physical communication, right, to call our attention in Paris for us spiritists, and then it developed and went further. And so I think it's important for us to remind everybody that there has always been mediumship. There has always been mediums. But I think what's really great about Spiritism is this focus and this understanding and this rationality and reason that we bring to the study of this topic. In a way that is not just for the learned or for the initiated. Anybody can learn about this, starting by picking up the Spirit's book and then the Medium's book, or starting with the Medium's book. But all that to say, I think that there's three components to the way that Spiritists practice mediumship that are somewhat unique to Spiritism. Not that by themselves they are unique, but together, I think that they make the Spiritist approach very unique. I think the first one is that we have a very keen sense of service to others and to the two planes of life. And we can talk a little bit about there. Mm-hmm. And I think that the second one is that we have a team-based approach to mediumship generally. And that's very different than perhaps most of our spiritualist friends sometimes. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in other ways of practicing mediumship, but we pay a lot of attention to that piece, right? And I think that the third part is what you mentioned as well, Marcia, is that we take this approach that is best to practice mediumship for free without having any kind of paid or financial transactions in there. And if we are to double click a little bit on those three aspects, and starting by the service to others piece, I think we can say that mediumship is always a service to others, right? Because it's a connection between the two realms of life. So it's not that special from anybody else to practice mediumship in the world. But what I think is really interesting about us Spiritists is that while a lot of folks are trying to contact the spiritual realm to obtain information that can help them with their current lives, we also do that. But a lot of our practice is also geared towards helping people make sense of potential mental health issues that they may have here or in the beyond. So the interesting thing about Spiritist mediumship is that a lot of our focus goes into also counseling, not only those who are here with us right now, who we call incarnates, but also those who are no longer in a physical body. We call them discarnates in Spiritism, and who perhaps have not realized that they have passed because they didn't believe there was an afterlife, or because they are struggling with something else, or because they had a sudden passing. And part of that part of that mental health approach that I think we take to mediumship is this counseling and trying to establish two different things. One is that we should be aware that there is a spiritual reality, right? When we are unaware of that spiritual reality, and we are, for instance, on the other side, that's traumatic. We don't know what's going on. There's a lot of confusion. So there's a lot of counseling that takes place in our Spiritist meetings that way. And the second one is working on healthy relationships. And I think that's a really interesting piece, because sometimes we forget that, discarnates of spirits who are no longer with us also have relationship problems on the other side. And sometimes a lot of our work goes to helping those spirits, because not a lot of people are doing that. And so in our Spiritist communication, and sometimes we talk about rescue work or de-obsession work, that really means that we get together to work on counseling spirits who may not know they have passed, or who might be experiencing challenges with situations and people that they cannot let go of. They have become so obsessed with a single point of happenstance in their lives that they cannot let go of. And it's harder when you don't have a physical body, because your mind is even more powerful. You can focus and get stuck even more. And so our counseling takes place not only to the living, so to speak, but those who no longer have a physical body. And I think that's quite unique to us, right? And because those group dynamics, because they happen, relationships are always a group dynamics. Sometimes we do this sort of family counseling from a spiritual perspective, right? We counsel multiple spirits who may be having relationship challenges with those who are living, or even those who are past. And so we may talk to one side of the argument, and then we may talk to another spirit and help them see that it does not benefit them to continuously influence each other in a negative manner. And I think that's unique to Spiritism, and that's why also our meetings are oftentimes private. They are not open to the public, because these are confidential and delicate matters that it doesn't really lend themselves well to anybody watching, right? How would you watch if you were how would you feel if you were getting counseled and somebody was like peeping in and checking it in, right? It makes it really, really awkward and really difficult for the mediums and participants of those mediums too, because they could feel like they're being judged. So a lot of our meetings take place in a private setting to allow for that confidentiality, for the work as a team. And because, as I said, we work as a team for these counseling sessions, we benefit from the different roles that can happen in mediumship, right? So in our meetings, you'll find mediums who actually let the spirits communicate through them. You're going to find counselors who actually dialogue with those people, and discarnates. You're also going to find others who are there to support morally, emotionally, energetically with great vibrations to kind of help sustain the environment and hold the space for all of that. So that team-based approach, I think, is very unique in many different ways as well for Spiritism. And of course, we also talk about the suggestion that the good spirits give us when it comes to free mediumship. And by free mediumship, we're talking about unpaid mediumship. Right. And the reason for that is manifold. There are many reasons why we choose to go that route. I think one of those is because we study mediumship so much, and we understand that the medium is is one component of the whole mediumship process, right? That it is not the medium's ability that really determines how the communication happens. We know that there is also the other side, right? There are mentors and guides who are making that happen, who are lining up the spirits to communicate and to help us bridge that gap and find and help spirits communicate. So it doesn't feel completely naturally right for us to charge for a service in which we're not the ones who are the only ones providing it. And I think in addition to that, we also understand that we cannot guarantee the communication. Right. So as a medium, you cannot guarantee that you always reach the person that you are searching for. So it makes it awkward to charge for something that you can't deliver. So we choose not to go that route. You can have the phone ring, but it doesn't mean that they're going to pick it up on the other side. Right. So you can't really, we feel like we can't really charge for a call that's not complete. And if we try to force that call because we're getting paid, the medium risks, what we call mystification. Right, the medium risks the opportunity of trying to force a communication with the spirit, and because mediumship is very sublime and very subtle in many different ways, another spirit may try to impersonate that person that you are searching for, and because you really are forcing that communication because you're getting paid for that, there's a higher chance that you might be prey to fraud from a spiritual perspective. Right. And so it's also an act of protecting our own mediums, our nascent mediums, our developing mediums, to suggest that they don't charge. It's good for the client, so to speak, because there's no guarantee that the service will be performed. Right. But it's also good for the medium, who is less likely to be a victim of impersonation, right, or spiritual fraud, so to speak, which I guess it's a problem in our days here in the incarnate world as well. Right. With fake news. But all that, I think the last piece that we can say about also the charging stuff is it also helps not create a dependency between those who are seeking communications and the mediums. Because, I think that a lot of people sometimes are in a delicate moment of their lives and they're seeking counsel from the spiritual world, which is very valid and very beautiful. But we don't want to establish a paying relationship in which they feel like they can constantly come and pay for that contact, because you cannot guarantee that contact, right? So we want to empower people to reach their own conclusions and not just think that as a service so you can go anytime and talk to the spirits to get a solution for your life. We have tons of spirits and good spirits telling us that we have the ability to solve our own problems. And so we don't want to create that dependency on the mediumistic phenomena, right? But of course, it's also very important for us to say that we do not judge anybody who charges. Right? We're not in the business of judging other people. We're here to work on ourselves. So Spiritism passes no judgment on other people who charge or don't, because Spiritism has no judgment to offer. What Spiritism does is has information to share with us about how and why we could think about behaving. So all means we have no ill will at all or judgment towards our spiritualist brothers and sisters who may make this a career. We just choose not to do that ourselves because we are trying to pay it forward in that specific way to develop and grow ourselves. So I think these three characteristics are really central to how Spiritism sees mediumship, that it's a service to others, not only to those who are here in an incarnate plane, but also those who are in the discarnate plane, that we take a team-based approach and that we choose not to perform paid services with mediumship for all these reasons that we talked about. All of those things can also be practiced by anybody else. And by themselves, they might not be unique. But I think what's unique about our approach is that we do the three of them together.
This is incredible. And it's important. It ties back to what Flavio mentioned earlier, right? Spiritism is about serving. It's about loving. It's about exercising that human component, right? Beyond be a medium, you are human first. I would love to, because you talked about the approach and those three areas, Dan, I would love maybe if Susanna could talk a little bit about sorry, if Flavio first and then Susanna, but Flavio, if you could talk about maybe Spiritism and training, because I know that Dan spoke about it, right? That it's actually easy. It's in the DNA of what Spiritism is mediumship, and that we can learn about it. But how do we train? If you could talk a little bit about it. And Dan, let's go back after Susanna. Just I'm saying this so that you can start thinking about it. If you could perhaps talk a little bit more about what is that rescue work that you were talking about it, and what makes a spiritist medium able to do so? What makes them capable of doing so. So with back to Flavio, and I'm sprinkling to everyone here work and discussions. Flavio, do you mind talking a little about Spiritist centers, and training to become a medium? What does it look like? Can we be trained? Can we learn? What are the types of educations that one can get?
Sure. Several authors talk about this topic, right? So how to prepare oneself for the practice of mediumship. So I'm gonna use Dan's, power of three, because every time we use three things, we remember in our heads. So the first, one that I would say is the greatest need for a medium is it to educate him or herself, right? And I know that education can mean a lot of different things to different people, but here we're talking about the importance of a serious study in a group, right? Amongst other folks, learning about the benefits, the implications, the needs, right? The rules of mediumship that Spiritism brings, this framework that Allan Kardec brings, that really helps us remove all of our misconceptions around mediumship. That way, we have a good understanding, or a great understanding of the risks and the benefits of becoming a medium, right? That's one. The other one is, besides studying, it's also working hard towards his or her own enlightenment. Meaning, we use mediumship in order to help others, right? Not only others that are discarnates, but we help ourselves as well. The medium, the group, the team that we're working with. So again, developing ourselves in order to be able to collaborate, right? To let go of our egos, of our all self-centeredness, and really be there as a team member, participating, practicing, collaborating with the overall work that is Jesus' work. That's the second piece, right? As I mentioned before, right? Charity should be, the verb that we all, say. Everything that we do within Spiritism and mediumship is no different than that, right? Treating folks with respect, incarnates and discarnates, always jumping in with, any opportunities to help and so forth, right? And the third component I would say is, in order for someone to efficiently cooperate or collaborate with spirit guides, right? The person has to have a sincere commitment, not only, a time commitment, but also commitment to participating in studies, to develop him or herself, to collaborate, to contribute, and obviously, right, a commitment to the truth, because there's a lot of need in our rescue sessions, in our mediumship sessions. There's a lot of need there that, we're us mediums, right? We're just the vehicles, right? We're not the ones, the session's not about us, but instead it's about those who are in need. So I think those three components are a way to prepare oneself to become a medium. And of course, different Spiritist centers are going to have different types of studies, different lengths of studies, right? Again, we're not here to talk about that, but essentially what we're saying is mediumship without proper preparation, with proper studies, it's a very risky proposition.
Very, very, very important cautionary tale for, especially as we heard about the Fox sisters, right? How much they endured, including addiction, et cetera, how important. So thank you for letting us know that the difficulty to pursue that without the proper education, proper training. Susanna, do you mind addressing what Dan and Flavio both discussed, as this is something that we, and I'm talking about we Spiritist centers, that we do, and we work as a team. Can you maybe expand that thought process?
Sure. First, I just want to make a brief comment. I couldn't help while Daniel was talking to remember Whoopi Goldberg, and I can't think of the name of the movie.
Ghost.
What was it?
Ghost.
Yes, Ghost. Yes, that I just really, she materialized in my brain, and I just kept, watching those scenes again, because I think they illustrate, and Marcia started, bringing up Netflix and movies, so it's just an incredible illustration of the concept that Daniel was talking about with charges and things like that. I think mediumship in Spiritism has a very unique practice methodology that it's quite different from mediumship in other religions and places. And that has to do with what both Daniel and Flavio already touched on, which is what is the purpose of mediumship in Spiritism. And Flavio mentioned the mediumship is about communication. Well, we can communicate with spirits by going to a busy downtown area and talking to people. That's communication with spirits, because we are all spirits. But what makes it different in Spiritism is that that communication has a particular purpose. And there are two main purposes for the communication. The purposes are educational and charitable. So we talk to spirits to educate them and to educate ourselves. And we do that to be at service, the service of love and goodness to them and to ourselves. And for that, it requires, as Dan already touched as well, that we work in a special team that can give support to the work. I think for someone who is not familiar with Spiritism, perhaps the best analogy that comes to mind is to imagine a surgical room when someone is undergoing surgery, which is a very complex procedure where you are attending to something that is serious, that level of seriousness. You don't go into a surgery room alone. You need a team. You need a team that can be there, first of all, cleaning the room, making sure that everything is ready, is sanitized, is cleaned up, and the room is prepared for the type of work that's going to take place. So that is a job from both teams involved in this work. The spiritual, which does mostly of it, but we also have, as a team, the work of going in with our thoughts and our physical bodies as clean as possible so that we can make a good contribution, giving our fluids and making our donation of love, so requires a preparation from the team. And Dan already mentioned some of the key players. So you have someone who is directing that meeting, who is required to have a good understanding of Spiritism and of mediumship. Also someone who is committed with his or her own enlightenment. And you have the mediums themselves. You have the ones who are doing the dialogue, and you have the ones who are the support team, so to speak. So very much like in the surgery, you have someone who is checking the vitals. You have someone who is handling the tools. You have a team leader. In every surgery room, there is a person who is dictating what needs to be done, who is, making sure every single team member is performing their role accurately, and who is ready to step up in case of any necessity. So here we are dealing with our human limitations. We are dealing with spirits who are suffering, spirits who might be angry, and it can be difficult communications for the medium that does require some support, that might require some extra energy. You need a room that is with the right vibrations, loving vibrations that can help the success of the work. So it is extremely key for the success of mediumship in Spiritism that you have a cohesive team. And going back to what Flavio was talking about, the preparation, this is why when we start the work of mediumship, and this is a very difficult item for some folks who come into the Spiritist Center and into Spiritism to understand. There is a sense of rush sometimes in starting mediumship in the Spiritist Center. And people really have a difficult time understanding that in order to have this this type of work to be successful, the most important component is the team, and is the cohesiveness, and is the closeness, and is the trust that needs to be developed. And I would say, and above all of this, the friendship that needs to exist, because the work is difficult. It's not simple. It's going to require a lot of resolution of conflicts that are going to arise because we are dealing with humans, and it's a complex work where we need to provide feedback. We need to analyze what is going on in order to improve the work. We don't like that, although that is what Kardec did throughout his entire work. He analyzed things. He analyzed mediums. He analyzed messages. We don't like that. We have a very difficult time in getting feedback from anyone, including our friends. And so we are that vulnerable, and that creates an incredible challenge in the work for us. So the time that we spend in what is called the harmonization period, where the team comes together and spends some time studying, reading, and with some beginner's practice of meditation, of visualization, all that will provide time for the team to get to know one another, to understand what each team member brings to the table, also to start realizing what are the characteristics and possibilities of each team member. So who will be the one who will be directing the work? Who are the ones who have a great capacity for holding the thoughts together that can sustain the work, right? So we started to understand what the roles are and playing with these roles a little bit until the work actually gets launched. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this harmonization of the team. And I go back to, Paul and Stephen, the book that many of us know. And if someone does not know, it is a book that talks about the story of Saul and Paul, his conversion, and the Christians of the time, the work done of the time. And we see the presence of mediumship in the churches of the time, where actually physical phenomena of direct voices would be heard in the churches until the moment that it starts to happen some conflicts amongst the members of the church. And then suddenly the phenomena is gone. Because again, the most important component, yes, study is going to be very important. Understanding of mediumship is important. Commitment is important. A lot of things are going to be important, but the love, the trust, right? And I being part of a mediums group with folks who have started with me from the very beginning. We've been together for 10 years, right? I still feel like, and we all share this feeling, walking on eggshells sometimes when we must say something. That is the extent of the challenge that we have in this work. But it's possible, it's doable, and it's very therapeutic. And it's very important that we understand that it comes with share of conflicts, and that is actually part of the process for growth, for enlightenment. I think when you choose to go into a medium's book, you're choosing to do either a master's or a PhD in relations, with that very intimate group of people who commit together to deliver that work. So it is very, very team-based. Every single member has a very important role. One is no more than the other. It needs all its elements in order to work properly. Configurations will vary from place to place. Some groups have more people who are available to participate. Others have less. There is a little bit of variance sometimes. But again, the most important thing is the team commitment, study, and commitment to overcome conflicts and to continue to love one another, respecting, being open for differences, and working together.
This is awesome. I think Dan, Susanna already spoke with what I asked you, but let's just, before we move on.
I apologize.
No, this is awesome.
This is all the time. Where are you
But
going? Yeah.
Flavio and Susanna talked about mediumship. It's about communication, right? And as we think of ourselves as simply a tool for communication, right? So Dan, you mentioned historically, mediums were oracles, shamans, people of incredible respect and enlightenment, right? Where the droves of people would come to them asking, seeking for answers. But if we think of the medium as now just a microphone, right? We're just a microphone. And as a microphone, we cannot charge because we cannot control the message. We're just that tool. And then Susanna talks about it's about the purpose, and both the three of you talked about the purpose, which is love and serve and charity. So can you maybe just give a little bit more of Dan's thoughts on that purpose and how that makes the Spiritist medium specially prepared for that type of counseling or rescue work? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think that my friends here did a fabulous job of talking about the preparation that goes into being part of that team. And I think that if we go back to this idea that mediumship is the act of being an intermediary between the two planes of life, we have to also understand that we have to understand what is it that we are intermediating. And how is that's happening? And I say that because we have this image that mediumship is like an on and off switch, right? That you just completely give way to another consciousness that will come and speak through your body. And it's a lot more subtle than that, right? And we even spend a little bit of time when we're studying mediumship, studying, intuition, for instance, right? Which is potentially a way of doing that. And it's not uncommon for mediums to struggle, especially at the beginning of their mediumship education, in determining whether the thought that they are receiving, it is their thought or is it an external thought. And that's why it's so important to spend time studying oneself, like my friends were saying here, because if you don't know who you are, it becomes difficult for you to differentiate between what is yours and what is not yours. But to the extent that you engage in this commitment to be a medium within the Spiritist context and go into these different conversations, right, with some spirits who might be happy or not or confused, it really behooves you to really know who you are so that you are not doubtful about what's coming through, right? And so that you can kind of get yourself out of the way to let the message come in, because the message is never coming 100% perfect. There's always a filter on the medium who is receiving and passing that through. So in that sense, right, I'm happy to report that we're more than a microphone, right? We are noise canceling, content filtering microphone that to extent is part of that communication, right? So that preparation, that importance of committing oneself to get to know oneself and understand what triggers you and what doesn't trigger you, and see how that is reflected on the messages that you're going through, is extremely important. And I think one everyday example is, imagine that I am sending a message from Flavio to Susanna, and Flavio might not be happy with Susanna, and he tells me that story. And for whatever reason, that story kind of triggers something in me and I get more charged. So when I go talk to Susanna, I'm not only deliver Flavio's message, I am delivering my own emotional baggage to Susanna as well, right? Which makes it even harder for Susanna to kind of solve and help me figure things out or solve the problem. So as part of our training, as a part of our dedication to this rescue work, to this service work, we have to be, or try to be, as unbiased as possible in that communication. And that requires knowing where your faults and your triggers and your shortcomings lie. And that's incredibly difficult work, but it's incredibly rewarding work too. Because what Susanna was saying about the purpose of communication is really true. Sometimes we have this natural desire to have this mediumistic communications, become a medium, because we're going to help a lot of people, we think. But the truth is, the spirits could do all of that without us.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need us to get their message through, right? So the reason why we're there is because it benefits us first. And I think we have to take that lens and that humble slice of pie, right, to understand that the work could be done without us. Somebody else could step in here. We even talked about the team part. And then, you know, we have backups on the team. Maybe that day I'm going to do that function in that group, but I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling under the weather, or I had a really tough day and I'm having a tough time leaving behind the challenges of my everyday. I might tap out and say, no, guys, today I'm having a really tough time with some things that happen. Can I take a different role today? And then Flavio will step in and take my role for that day as a team so that the work continues, right? So I think that there's a lot of nuance here that sometimes we are not aware of because we haven't spent enough time thinking and understanding mediumship, but that nevertheless is really important for those who are desirous, who want to kind of develop their mediumship or be part of a mediumistic team that's working towards something else. So preparation there, it's really important. And it's really key, not only to the process, the teamwork that Susanna and Flavio were talking about, but also because it will help us understand who we are, get that feedback, right? And improve ourselves. Because that's, at the end of the day, what we can control, right? We can control our own behavior. And that's what we're here for. We're here to try to become better human beings. And so that preparation, that study, it's something that is really key because it leads us to get to know ourselves. And that is extremely difficult work. It is very hard to really look inside. It's so much easier to look outside and blame Flavio for this or Susanna for that, when in fact, the challenge is me, which is often the case, by the way, people, right? When I'm talking to Flavio and Susanna. But anyways, I think you get the point. I think that this idea of knowing oneself is key to personal, emotional, intellectual, spiritual development. And that kind of work leads us to think that way. Because when we are really counseling or talking to a spirit about a challenge in their lives, it will be hypocritical of us to say, oh, you have to be more forgiving, Flavio, when I myself am not. Especially because many times they know who we are because maybe they watched us in our day-to-day lives. Maybe they followed us around, right? And we've had many different tales of people saying, you should be more forgiving. And the spirit could turn around and say, but hold on a second. You are not forgiving with so-and-so on that particular day. I saw you, right? And you have to own up to that. So it's a moral commitment, because anytime you tell people how to behave, you are making a commitment that you're going to do better than that. Otherwise, Absolutely. It's just words, right?
Yes.
So it is a work of heart and mind, right? Both of those have to kind of work together, and that's tough work. It's beautiful work, but it can be draining and exhausting because looking at oneself is never an easy thing. And that's why it's so great to work with people you trust and that you care about, and you have developed that affinity, because you're going to have off days, you're going to have down days, and they're going to pick you up, right? And when you're way too high, they might help you come down a little bit and say, hold on a second, buddy, right? You forgot about this. That was not all you, right? So it's a wonderful thing to be part of a team, to be able to do this like Gestalt thing where like 1 + 1 + 1, it's not 3, it's like 4, right? It adds to the whole team to have that together. So the preparation, that study, is something very important that we take very seriously. And that's one of the beauties of, I think, Kardec, is giving us the ability to really dive deeper. Let's just take a quick second here to celebrate that guy, because think about it. Like, we were talking about shamans, we were talking about high priests, right? And prophets. Like, we have this heightened view of who they are. They're special beings. And that's because we didn't understand the process. And when we don't understand what the process looks like, it seems mysterious. It seems special. Much the same way, I think that as a humanity, we might have scared, right? Big time when there was like thunder and lightning storm 2,000 years ago. We don't understand what it was. So it was really scary, magical, and special. But once we pull the curtain from how things actually work, we understand that's a natural phenomena. And now we've done the same thing with mediumship through this incredible book, the Medium's Book. We can now understand how it happens, why it happens, and how we can develop and make sense of it. And so that demystifies the medium. The medium is no longer a person that we put up on a pedestal, because it has the ability to do that, to communicate with the spiritual world, right? Much the same way we don't put anybody else in a pedestal because of their ability to do anything else. They're human. So it helps us understand that this is like one facet of who we are, one ability that we have to kind of work on. And it also helps us to understand that even if we don't become what we sometimes call extensive mediums, or mediums that actually can hear and communicate with the spirits, we are constantly interacting with them, whether we are conscious or not. And so that's an important point for self-development too. Like, I might not have the ability to hear or see the spirits, but when I am aware of their influence in my day-to-day life, I might be a better judge of character in stopping myself and saying, why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I acting this way? Should I act this way? Should I feel this way? So it's a wonderful opportunity for self-discovery. It's not an easy one, but it's definitely worth it. It takes time, blood, sweat, and tears, but it's an incredible opportunity for growth, first for us, right? And how beautiful it is that in the process of growing, we can try to help others and add to the world around us. It's an incredible opportunity that we have, no doubt.
This is great. Thank you, everyone. We have about another 30 minutes of a round table, so I would like to maybe get to the remaining time that we have here to talk about the purpose, right? We define mediumship in this conversation. Then we talked about the how, the process of becoming a medium in a Spiritist center, and the approach. And we also discussed the purpose as the key. So, Susanna, if you don't mind, would you mind telling the audience here today for this symposium, why is mediumship so important to us? How can we maybe truly look at the mediumship as that act of love that you talked earlier? How can we frame that so that everyone can understand the beauty and the importance of mediumship?
That's a tough question, but let's try here. So I'm going to use our last 30 minutes here, right? We commented a few times the fact that mediumship has always been in the history of humankind throughout all times, and what we have known about mediumship and how it has been used is mostly surrounded by misunderstanding, mysticism, and also very much used by humans as a source of power, as a source of fame, for financial gains. So going back to what Dan says, I'm not saying this from a judgmental way. I'm saying this as a pragmatic way. I mean, it is how it has been utilized in most of the times at the service of our egos. So mediums are seen as special, as seen as different. Sometimes they are the ones who have certain knowledge, so they are famous, they are placed in special positions, and a lot of times they actually can make a lot of money out of their mediumship, and that's how it has been until Jesus comes, right? So when Jesus comes, Jesus brings a different paradigm in terms of mediumship. And why am I touching this? Because Spiritism is the expansion and the deeper understanding of Jesus' message. So when Jesus came, he is considered in Spiritism as being the medium of God, in the sense that he was the intermediary, he was the purest expression of God's laws on earth, right? And how are we going to see Jesus using his mediumship? He talks to spirits, he casts away spirits. So the way mediumship is used by Jesus, who is our reference of the highest spirit who was here with us on earth, is one of love and service. is one of freeing individuals from suffering, of educating, of renewing opportunities, of helping. And so we have that reference very strong for ourselves. And then after that, we have Spiritism that comes and expands on the idea of mediumship. And one important revelation that comes with Spiritism, and Emmanuel and other authors will address that in their body of work as well, is the understanding that, contrary to what we thought, the vast majority of mediums are folks that are reincarnated with a past of very, very deep trouble. A lot of wrongdoings, people who had abilities to do good and didn't do good, who had ability to use their potential for the construction of something positive, and they use their force, abilities, and talents in erroneous ways. So this is a very important information that we have, that Spiritism brings to us. So now, if you are a medium, and a medium who has a more ostensive opportunity, it's given to you for your redemption, for your rehabilitation. So when we think about mediumship as an act of love, I would like to think in different ways. One is an act of God, an act of love of God towards us, that shows God's incredible mercifulness in always attending to our immaturity, to our frailty, and not only giving us new opportunities, but actually enhancing these opportunities by putting on our physical composition the ability to serve others. So we are invited to love. We are invited to the work of our own redemption by serving, by having an extra tool to love others, to serve others, just like Jesus did. But also understanding that the first person that benefits from the work is ourselves. And this is one of the reasons why we have mediumship groups, so that when we talk to the Spirit and we share with the Spirit our Spiritist knowledge, the first person who is actually listening to what we are saying is ourselves. So we are saying that to the Spirit: yes, my dear brother, you must forgive. It's going to be good for you. It's going to bring peace to your heart, etc., etc. And so it's important that as we say that, we hear that, because we're going to need that ourselves the moment that we leave that room. So I like to think of it as an act of love from God's perspective, from our perspective towards others, and as an incredible tool for enlightenment and for spiritual growth that requires from us some work, some inner work, right? So how are we going? Mediumship in itself is a very neutral tool. The whole thing and the whole differential in Spiritism, how do we choose to use it, is the direction that we're going to give to it. So if we choose to do a work of love, we also want to be accompanied by good spirits. We want to be able to be good instruments to the good spirits. So there is I would like to bring this passage from where is a letter of Paul to Timothy, when he talks, if you keep yourself pure, you will be a special utensil for honorable use. And that is the idea, right? So, and that is the great opportunity that mediumship gives to us. The idea is that by doing the inner work that Dan was talking about, very difficult, yes, but that is the whole purpose of our existence here, is to do that inner work. We want to, and see, from the moment we understand what is the purpose of mediumship, it gives us an incredible chance to do this inner work and to do the pure vase or the good instrument in the service of others. So we help others and we help ourselves. We have to commit to do this work of being these good tools, these good instruments. So is that also an act of self-love? So it doesn't matter how you look at it. There's love everywhere. It's love of God towards ourselves. It's self-love in the sense I commit to do the work, and I commit to do the work by being the best instrument possible. I want to be this pure instrument or this clean vase so that the good spirits can use me to deliver the message. That's it. We are male people. We are delivering the message. But I want to be the good mailman, the good mailwoman, the good instrument so I can serve. So it helps me tremendously because the more I'm committed to my inner work, the better instrument I become. And this is a act of self-love. And then I'm also become better able to be of service and to help others who are in need. So I really like to think about mediumship and correlate with love from these different angles and perspective.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susanna. This is great. And as I mentioned before, we're coming to the close, but I wanted to ask if Flavio, do you want to add any thoughts to the comments about that commitment and that opportunity to give?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's even before the commitment, right? I think there's still a misconception, Marcia, that we hear and we see in our Spiritist centers. People coming in, right? Hey, I want to become part of. I'm a medium. I want to be part of the mediumship group and all this, right? There's a misconception that mediums are special people, whereas in reality, right, mediums are the ones that need the most, right? So we are the ones that made a lot of wrongdoings in the past, and now the law of God is giving us an opportunity through mediumship, right, to really exercise our love and to really become better spirits. What Susanna mentioned, mediumship doesn't really make us better, right? Mediumship is just a vehicle, right? We can use it to make us better, or we can use it to make us a little more complicated for the future, like the Fox sisters and so many others that really leverage mediumship for the wrong purpose, as we learn in Spiritism, right? So once again, that's why it's pivotal, right? It's critically important in that commitment, in that training, in that phase where one who volunteers, one who becomes a candidate to become a medium, to really attend those sessions, the training classes, and there are many pedagogical instances out there that really teaches mediumship, but in all of them, if they are based on Allan Kardec's works, all of them, right, call for rigorous studies, for deep commitment, not only in the mediumship meeting, but it's a life commitment of helping others, of learning, going the inner journey, as Dan mentioned really well, right? It's really changing or modifying ourselves. So that's mediumship doesn't make us better, but this commitment, this work, rolling up the sleeves and really doing more for us and for the others that are in front of us, that's what makes us better. So that training gets us to where we want to be, right? But that how is it that oftentimes people fail, right? Oh, I don't want to do mediumship. It's too hard. It's too difficult. Yeah, it's a tough job. It's a very difficult job for one to undergo because it requires a lot of motivation, a lot of commitment. Susanna mentioned really well, everybody that really jumps onto the mediumship, development and studies, right, has to know that there's going to be a lot of critical feedback involved. So if you're not okay on receiving feedback, right, that's a tough place for you to be because feedback, right, giving and receiving feedback, that's a very important characteristic of mediumship meetings because as a team, has to be a very cohesive team and feedback, to each other, us helping each other out, us moving towards the same direction. That's critical for a quote unquote successful mediumship meetings. That's why it takes time. That's why it's tough, but it's very rewarding nevertheless.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to, before we close our session here and go to break, I would ask sorry, I would like to ask Dan, maybe Dan, if you have any final thoughts, yeah, I'd love to hear. Is there any call to action to everyone here regarding maybe mediumship and maybe mediumship today, right? Not so much in the beginning or even with the Fox sisters, but today in our reality. And with that, Dan, we would close with your remarks.
Wow, what an honor! But I would like to hop on the Susanna and Flavio bandwagon, right? And say that mediumship is a wonderful tool for self-development, not just for intellectual reasons. I think that we often talk about how wonderful, the medium's book is, and how wonderful the Spiritist knowledge that we have been able to gather because of our understanding of mediumship is, and that is also very true. But I think, the one important piece about mediumship that maybe we want to overemphasize today is that mediumship in many ways is a heightened sensitivity, right? A heightened sensitivity to others and to the world around us when we are in that act of communication. So it is a lot about learning to turn it off when we're not prepared to deal with it, but it's a lot about learning how to tune in and turn it on when we have to, right? And we want to. And in that moment, I don't know that if I know of any other tool that will help us develop empathy as much as mediumship will. Because mediums report this. When they are in the act of mediumship, when they are in that spiritist meeting, serving others, they feel what that spirit is feeling, right? Not to the same extent that the extent that the spirit's feeling, to a lower degree, but they do feel, because there is that connection in the moment. And in that moment, you are feeling somebody else's experiences. And it's hard for you to deny those experiences and that they exist and that they impact. And so it is a blessing in the sense that when we are in this mediumship meeting, whether you're a medium or you're dialoguing and talking, you get to hear these wonderful experiences that take things from the abstract, the theoretical, and the intellectual and bring it to everyday lives. You see real examples of how people are struggling through things or how they are happy through things. And that personal connection speaks to the heart as well. And that really helps all of us. It helps all of us because we need to make that connection between the mind and the heart, right? The toughest race that we must run, right? The longest distance is the distance between the heart and the mind. And connecting those two things is really what we are here about, I think. Right, to really making sure that we are leveraging those two modes of being, intellecting, cognitively speaking, and emoting and feeling things as well. And so mediumship gives us the arena in which we can do that. We can develop our empathy for what others are feeling. Mediums, when they feel that, they cannot deny that experience. They cannot deny how he felt. And if you are in that meeting, you can also sense that. And sometimes these meetings are so beautiful, our meetings, because there is tears of joy and pain involved. There is true emotion coming from, swelling from underneath. And there is a sense of gratitude sometimes that we can all be part of that. So I think if anything else, I want to echo Susanna and Flavio's call for us to really understand that this is about personal transformation. And it's about sympathy and empathy towards others too. And if we are to make this a better place, and if we are to make ourselves a better place, which we are resoundingly told by the good spirits that that is what the future looks like, and that's what's going to happen, then we got to practice being more empathic, being more empathetic of each other, understanding what we're going through, not just on an intellectual level, but putting ourselves in that shoes. And I think that mediumship does that. So you don't have to be a medium to exercise that empathy. And I think that's what's left with us here. You don't have to be an extensive medium, because we have established that all of us are medium. All of us have the ability to be sensitive to the other. And if we do that, it is not only an act of kindness to the other, but it's an act of learning for ourselves, because when we feel things, we learn them more easily. So I hope that we can continue to study the wonderful body of knowledge that Spiritism is, and how it really helps us understand how mediumship works, how the mechanism takes place, how the interactions take place, how the spiritual world takes place, but that we do not forget to take a second to imagine how it feels to be in the process, how it feels to be in the receiving end of things, and how it feels to be that person that is across the table or across the room from us at any moment in time, so that we can be more considerate. So very excited to be here with you. I am honored to be part of this panel with my great friends, Flavio and Susanna. Very thankful for Marcia, for you to joining this gang here today as well. And thank you. And we wish, I'm going to take the risk of speaking on everybody's behalf here to wish everybody great learning moments throughout the symposium.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the audience for being here. I believe we're going to have a break. Peter Hayes will talk now, and want to part with the words of this invitation to study, this invitation to learning, right? To being in serving, but most importantly, to being human, to that ability to empath, but also to have compassion. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Dan, Susanna, Flavio, and Marcia for an engaging and informative exchange. We will take another short break to stretch a bit more. You can also take this time to submit your questions for the Q&A that will start right after the announcements. If you are looking for some books on Spiritism, please check out the website of the United States Spiritist Federation bookstore at www.spiritusbooks.us. Browse it and get your books on this user-friendly website. There are always some new arrivals, books in English and some in Portuguese, plus Spiritist magazines and books for children. Speaking of new arrivals, and just in time for this great celebration of the 160th anniversary of the Medium's book, the United States Spiritist Federation announces the release of the Medium's book to be coming soon. It will be available in the USSF bookstore at www.spiritistbooks.us. Every year, during the U.S. Spiritist Symposium, we get to learn more about the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association. For those who are not familiar with the SMA, its mission is to support spiritual care as a complementary therapy to the conventional approach in clinical practice. To learn more, please visit the SMA website at www.sma-us.org. SMA is announcing their second virtual Congress that will take place on November 20th and 21st. The event will be broadcast in 5 languages: English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and German. Save the date. Spread the news. Please follow event announcements at their website and on Facebook. Please check out this website for FIXI. That stands for Family, Youth, and Children's Spiritist Education. This is a relatively new department within the United States Spiritist Federation. Browse the website for more information. See how Spiritist groups all over the U.S. are collaborating to provide more resources that focus on the unique needs of teaching Spiritism to children, youth, and families, plus skills needed to understand and apply the principles of Spiritism to our family life. This is for educators, for parents, and for the kids. Get information on youth events, share with your groups, interact with the U.S. Spiritist Federation by asking questions and sending in your comments. And speaking of family, youth, and children, not to mention all kids from ages 0 to 99, Please do not miss this great event next month on July 10th and 11th. This will be the 18th year of the Family Spiritist Retreat, organized by the Tri-State Spiritist Federation in collaboration with the United States Spiritist Federation. Last year, it was all virtual. This year, we will have the opportunity of participating both virtually and in person. But here is what's new. The invitation to do in-person activities outdoors has been extended to different Spiritist groups in many different states. There will be events in California, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Illinois, and so forth. See more details on the website. Little by little, we are resuming this fraternal contact in person. Register now, as in immediately. Please register by June 10th. It is free. It is fun. Check it out. And now, let's watch a video inviting us to this event. With the International Spiritist Council, CEI, the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas has made available the Spirits book and now is releasing the Mediums book in audiobooks, all for free. Go to the YouTube channels on website of the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, or the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas, and use your time in a very useful way learning about Spiritism. Due to the long period of time it takes to organize a big event like the Worldwide Spiritist Congress, there has been a change of plans for 2022. Its virtual debut will be on October 15 and 16, 2022, and it will be organized by the Union Spiritus Français et Francophonique in collaboration with the International Spiritist Council. For more information, please follow the updates at www.10cem.com. Join us every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time to watch the talk series that is organized by the United States Spiritist Federation with special guests from many states within the U.S. and different countries who talk about different themes on Spiritism. These talks are in English. You can watch at the Facebook page or the YouTube channel of the USSF. Participate, ask questions, send your comments, an interactive way to learn more about Spiritism. In the past 5 years, the United States Spiritist Federation has published more than 30 Spiritist books in English. There's a lot more to do, and the resources got scarcer during these difficult times. But you, as an individual or your Spiritist center, can make a difference and help in the dissemination of Spiritism in English. Use this QR code on the screen now and send your donation for the publication of the series of 6 books by Teresinha de Oliveira and other titles. Be part of the solution. I'll give you just a brief moment to try and scan the QR code. Finally, follow the United States Spiritist Federation on social media and get all the information you need to learn about all events organized by the USSF. You can check it out on Facebook, on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. If you want to be informed about all that is going on, please subscribe at our website at www.spiritus.us. Thank you for listening to the announcements. All righty. Welcome back. If you submitted a question during the talk and roundtable discussion, now is the time to get your answer. Let me introduce the moderator of our Q&A session. Al Turi has been an active worker at the Spiritist movement in the U.S. as a speaker in several national symposia. On a regular basis, he is a speaker at the Peace and Knowledge Spiritist Center in Orlando, where he also teaches classes on Spiritism 101, among other courses. Professionally, Dr. Turi is the director of audiology for the Villages Health System in Orlando, Florida. And now, let's bring back Jasada Korngold, Dan Assisi, Susanna Simoes, and Flavio Zanetti. Welcome back.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end and entertaining these questions that we will be receiving shortly on the monitor. Here we go. All right. So this question is not directed towards anyone in particular. So whoever feels a yearning or a calling to get it, I would say we go for it. Why do you think that despite these phenomena of mediumship have always existed, since the year of 1848 was chosen to be a major deal for the world? And I think this would tie into Jasara's talk, actually. So maybe we'll go there first.
Okay, thank you all. All right. So it's a very important question, actually, for us to try to understand the timing that everything happened. We have to think about, the historical moment that we were living, not only in this country, but even in Europe, with new ideas coming up and positivism in Europe, in France more in particular. Here in this country, even the spirits in communication they gave on the Spiritist Review of 1862 that Kardec brings to us, he says and he comments that the spirits wanted a Spiritism or all the phenomena to appear in a country that provided absolute freedom of opinion. So, but we had all that here in the U.S. During our presentation, we showed that how even in the Wayne County they had, they were used to new ideas, new philosophies and religions popping up. But we have to understand that with the growth of civilization and the understanding and search of things, we also have, and we have to take into consideration that 20 to 40% of children died before the age of 5 at that time. And there was a yearning to try to talk to people, to try to see if the spirits were there. Even Mary Todd Lincoln, she held seances at the White House because she lost 3 of our 4 children. The Civil War as well was really bringing so many deaths into this country, 750,000 dead soldiers, and then they started experimenting with spirit photography. There was this need, and people were more open, we would say, to be able to try to venture into the spirit realm, to see if there could be more prominent communication, or communication that would make sense. And like we said, after that, it traveled to Europe. It had to be Europe because there was, the bed for, or the cradle for everything that intellectual, philosophical was taking place for the world to pay attention to. One thing that, believe it or not, contributed a lot was also the technological advancements that we're already having. At the beginning, for instance, in this country, they referred to all the phenomena that were happening in even with the Fox sisters and others, as being a spiritual telegraph. So they had something to compare already. They thought, well, if I can communicate with someone through the telegraph, maybe the spirits are using the same devices. So this invention from Samuel B. Morse was actually being taken into consideration as well, to the point that even Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, they were working on radios and spirit telephones because they were very curious about the supernatural implication of magnetism and other universal energies. So the time was very what was the right time for things to start happening, for people to start understanding communication. If we make a parallel, today, how easy it is for us to understand communication, like we are having here now, virtual communication through a machine. So from there, to imagine that this could be possible also to communicate with beings from other realms, it's much easier for us to think about all those things. So 1848, coming in a country that was embracing new ideas, new philosophies, that sent that to the world as the first movement. There is a scholar that he refers to the spiritualist movement as being the first major wave that went the other way around, because everything first was coming from Europe to the other continents, other countries. But now we have this spiritual movement, a spiritualist movement happening here and doing the other way around and impacting Europe and the rest of the world. So we can only trust that the spirits chose this particular point in time for a reason. And as we can see, it has been growing since.
Well, thank you, Gisara, for that added information and clarifying. Do any of the other panelists have any other thoughts on this while we're waiting for the next question?
Yeah, can I jump in?
Please.
So as Gisara there shuts down her enlightenment, she was, very enlightened with a ray of light coming, inspiring her. I love her comments because, I think that when we look at Spiritism as a body of knowledge, as a science, right? We have to credit the Age of Enlightenment, this era in the world that was taking place in the 17th and 18th century that laid a foundation for that kind of thinking. That's why I like to say that Spiritism is a body of knowledge that's ahead of its time, but not before its time. If these phenomena were taking place before, like a century or and a half or 2 centuries before, we wouldn't have Spiritism, because we wouldn't have the thinking method solid enough to be able to take that scientific approach and codify all those thoughts in such a systemic way. So I think what Gisara was talking about was really great, because the thinking had not yet matured in our collective psyche, so to speak, as a society, for us to be able to lay the scientific foundations that Spiritism is based on. So I am really, really always impressed and touched by the idea that the good spirits knew exactly what they were doing. They were waiting for us to develop the foundational thinking that we needed in terms of science, philosophy, right? In general, to be able to then build on that with these manifestations and so forth. So it's really amazing that it took place exactly when it did. And it's also even more amazing that it took place when it did, and it continues to unveil all this knowledge for us that today we're still finding out about, right? So it's incredible how visionary that Spiritist body of knowledge is, because even though we don't use those words, like genetics, or we don't use all the different kinds of different terms, those ideas are contained in the Spirit's book, but only because it came right after that period of Age of Enlightenment that Susanna was speaking about. It's always fascinates me how there is a bigger planning on things. There's from a spiritual perspective.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for that added information. I loved it. The next question for Flavio, I believe, is can you stop being a medium? Example, you can hear, see spirits, but maybe you no longer want to be able to do that. I interact with mediums from time to time that tell me they wish they could turn it off, right? That it's a curse sometimes, if you will. So can you elaborate on that for us, please?
Sure. I think it's important to mention that as we learn through Spiritism, even before we incarnate, right, we are the ones asking for the mediumship opportunity, right? So we were the ones that asked before that faculty or that, the condition actually took place. Also, it's important to mention that we are ultimately responsible for everything that comes out of our mouths. If we're doing some channeling, some psycho, again, every mediumship, right, we are ultimately responsible for what comes out of it, right? There's no way, the Spirit said this, and no, we are the ones responsible for it. And therefore, we have ways to control, right, what happens or what takes place. How do we do that, right? That's our own, again, self, knowledge, right? Understanding our limitations, work with our own development. We touched on this a lot in the previous session, all in team, right? But that's how we control that, by controlling ourselves and becoming that really instrument, the well-tuned instrument that the music player can play on it, right? That's the analogy that I like to make on this one.
Yeah, wonderful. Any other thoughts from the panel on this question, or actually a follow-up before we go to others? There have been cases where youngsters, even adults that are first exhibiting mediumship ability before it's been developed, or by the private sector or the non-spiritist sector, they see a doctor and they talk about these abilities. It can be diagnosed or confused as mental health issues from time to time. How would you advise a parent or an adult, for that matter, if mediumship is being confused or diagnosed as a mental health issue?
I just want to, before attempt to answer this question, just add to what Flavio was also referring, that there are circumstances where someone can have be a medium, and that mediumship can be suspended by the spirit. So that's something that can happen, as well as sometimes you might see mediumship in children that as they grow and they complete their reincarnation process, some of that ability may not be there anymore. So they are sensitive because they are still in the process of completing their incarnation. So those are just some other possibilities that we can see with, mediumship being present and then not being there anymore. And I think this area is an area that is probably a big challenge for us as spiritists in trying to determine, and it really requires a good understanding of the process, like taking the history, very much like when you go to a doctor and the doctor spends time asking questions about how the symptoms appear. Is something that appears suddenly. You start having some perceptions, or a lot of times what we will realize is, for folks who have history of mental illness, that has been with them for their entire lives. So being able to ask the appropriate questions is one first step. Understanding that there's a lot of confounding factors. Mental illness can start and develop into an obsessive process, and vice versa. You can have an obsessive process that is prolonged and ends up actually leading to a chemical imbalance in the brain and triggering a mental illness as well. So the safest thing, especially for someone who is attending those folks at the Spiritist Center who doesn't have a lot of experience, is to, or even if we have, is always to make sure these people are attended by medical professionals that can do a proper diagnosis on the medical side, and receive, parallel to it, all the resources that the Spiritist Center can offer in terms of addressing the spiritual aspects that might be present. I'm sure that the other panelists might have something else to add.
May I jump in as well?
Yes, please, Dan.
I love that. And I think that it speaks directly to the first question of that series about turning off mediumship, right? I think that oftentimes when we have our physical perspective, we see mediumship as an inconvenience, something that we want to turn off because it doesn't suit our current lifestyle or expectation, or whatever it is. But one great thing that Spiritism does is it tells us that we should think about things from a spiritual perspective, not just a physical perspective. And while it might be an inconvenience from a physical perspective, there is a reason why that is happening. And we have to address and be aware of those reasons. And maybe, for instance, it could be that the person who's going through that difficult moment has actually asked for that kind of experience, to awaken that person to a lesson specific that is always hard for us to understand what it is from this side of life, right? So I want to invite us to think that mediumship is also a tool for development, even when it comes unannounced or uninvited. And that it invites us to think about and deal with the fact that we are spiritual beings. We can no longer ignore that when you are a medium, right? If you are going through this process and you want to turn it off and you can't, maybe that's a call for you to dive into a spiritual side of you that you didn't want to convince, but you have to as well. So while we can educate and deal with mediumship and learn how to best mold it and live with it, it's important for us to understand that there will be some instances in which we might not be completely able to turn that sensitivity off, maybe because we asked ourselves, even before we came into this life, to be awakened to that reality. So it's an invitation to think of ourselves as spiritual beings first, and not physical beings who just find that thing to be perhaps irritating or annoying or inconvenient.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
You know, you knew that was going to happen at least once, right? I had to be the sacrifice for that.
That was a quote of 2020, right? You're on mute.
Not now. I'm good. I'm good now, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Awesome. Did anybody else want to address that previous question before I ask Lais's question from online? Any other thoughts on that very important subject? Okay. So Lais via from the public asks, can you talk about the medium's responsibilities related to human vices such as drinking, alcohol, smoking, and abuses in the realm of eating and sex? I think she covered just about all the possible vices here. I don't think we left any out.
Lais, let me tell you something. It's very common for us to focus everything on the material aspect of life. So we are also talking about, the needs that we create for our physical body. And with that, some imbalances related to the intake of this or that, the exaggeration of this or that action. Of course, our goal here, our aim in each and every incarnation is to get better each time. But the main focus should always be in getting better, spiritually speaking. So that's why, we see that so much and present in the Spirit's book, question 919, 919A, that we talk so much about, about knowing ourselves, about being able to be mindful with everything that we think, we do, all the processes of life. But and so our focus should be in improving our spiritual side in terms of acquiring virtues, morals, and as a consequence, we will be shifting even from these, addictions, from these vices that are more related to the physical aspect of life. Many years ago, actually decades, I was kind of one of the innovators in this field. I decided to become a vegetarian, which was, huge. I'm talking like, over 30 years ago. It was not something that everyone was doing. And I remember that thinking to myself, and how everyone was going to reacted about it, as well as being something really hard, quite a sacrifice. And I would all the time be thinking of how easy it was to rid myself of, certain things, materially speaking, in this case, eating meat, versus, try to better my behavior, my inner emotions, to control, jealousy, vanity, pride. So yeah, I think the goal here is for us to move up, to understand that all this that you have presented, when we are talking about unbalanced emotions that will lead us to exaggerate in the field of everything that you mentioned, but everything actually is in the domain of the spirit, how we little by little understanding how this affects us, not only physiologically speaking, but emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually speaking. We will be shifting and moving away from this in a much easier way, and make it bearable for us to be able to incorporate in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that's a great response. Just a quick follow-up, if you don't mind. So you take someone, a medium that's working at a mediumship table, right, or a fraternal counselor in a center, or just a guy like me, right, that you're doing great on vice aversion, right? You're doing great, but then you slip, you fall off the wagon. Should you stop your mediumship activities for that duration? Should you take a pause? I mean, how do you decide to be self-responsible? Because the goal, remember, right, is to do good and to help. And if I'm not right, or if the medium's not right, when do you check yourself? When do you stop your activities while you readdress? Does that make sense? Is that a fair question?
Yeah. Does anyone would like to answer? Or well,
I think
yeah, okay, go ahead.
I think it has to be case by case, right?
Sure.
The mediumship group or work does not require perfect human beings. Otherwise, we wouldn't be there.
Sure, absolutely.
So we are there with our share of vices. Perhaps we are not the ones who drink, but we know that we have our issues, all of us. Now, we also know that the mediumship group is not a place where the people who are doing the work are the ones that are in incredible state of disorganization, or incredible need. If you are in this condition, then you need to be stabilize first. So I always like to think, when you were placed in the Spiritist Center, are you in need of the ER? Are you in need of a recovery room? Are you in need of rehab? Are you about to be discharged to outpatient therapy? That's how I think, right?
I love it.
So it will take an assessment, a self-assessment of the person, an assessment of the group, to determine what level of recovery are you. We are all under recovery, all of us, right? We all ill spirits. So the work helps us with our healing. So I think it takes common sense and an assessment of the magnitude and with the group. Sometimes I have had circumstances where a member of the group has come and said, "Listen, I am having difficulties with this," and we sat down together and we assessed the extent of the difficulties, and the group made a decision together. So I don't think there is a black and white answer for that. That's how I like to think about the process.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is very, very important, Susanna, because Spiritism per se does not prohibit anything, but instead it teaches us, right? The results or the outcomes of our actions. For example, if you consume, meat, or if you have an unbalanced sexual life, or if you have vices, or all those things, right? What do they do to our own tool, right? To our own spirit that's going to be needed in order for us to be mediums? It's going to hinder our ability to become or to be good mediums per se, right? That does not prevent us from being mediums, but it's going to hinder our ability. So do you want to have a well-oiled machine, or do you want to have a car that doesn't really, or a machine that it's not taken care of, it's just functioning half of the time? We don't want to do that, right? That's why we have, practices. That's why we have best practices, as well as training that can teach us all these things in order for us to prepare ourselves to become good mediums. It's very important, right?
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts before we move on to Ricardo's question, I believe? No? All right. Well, Ricardo wants to know, how can the people who don't have any apparent mediumship practice asking for and receiving inspiration from superior spirits to gather strength and direction to overcome their obstacles? Who would like to?
Long answer.
Well, why don't you start, Flavio? I'll go with you first.
So very simple, the way I see it. Ricardo, this works for me. Hopefully it does for you as well. Every time we pray, we ask God for something, right? But oftentimes we forget to listen to God's answer, to God's advice. What works for me is meditation. So meditation helps me center myself to listen to that intuition, to those answers. So every time I have a problem, every time I have a difficulty in my life, I pray and I meditate to arrive at the answer. And doing that has helped me, right, align with my thoughts and good, teachings and intuitions and whatnot to do a decent job, right, tackling some of the issues that I've had in my life in the past. Hopefully that works for you as well.
Flavio, I was thinking that the main problem is that we can't hear those answers, but many times we don't like them. We want them to be a different one. It's like you have a friend that comes to you and becomes the recipient of the a messenger of God or the good spirits to tell you exactly what you need. But then you say, well, but this is not what I want.
From God. I don't like
Let
that.
me ask again. Let me ask again, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, every child does this, right? You ask dad to see if you can eat that cookie. Dad says no, you're going to ask mom, right? That happens. And I think another scenario is important here too, is sometimes silence is the answer, right? Sometimes you're meant to figure that one out by yourself so that you are dependent on always asking other people what to do. What if the purpose of life, your purpose of life, is to discover what your purpose of life is, right? And what if there is not a set one, but you have to figure it out for yourself? So we got to make time for listening, and we have to also understand that sometimes we got to make a call on our own. I think that's also important to remember.
Awesome.
If I may,
go ahead.
Just add another sentence here. I think that it's really important to highlight that we are all mediums, right? So whether you are aware of that or not, whether you use that consciously or not, the reality is you are being influenced by spirits at all times, and you are receiving intuitions. So like Dan says, sometimes it's a matter of, and especially when you place the intent of your day, the intent of your life to grow, to be a good human being, you are going naturally to attract good spirits who are going to boost that intent. So sometimes it is the ability to just be quiet, because the you will capture the intuition. A lot of times you will think that is your own thought, but it's something that had been suggested to you. But you need to be able to open up to hear and to be vigilant of what's happening, because a lot of times the answers are coming to you, even if you didn't ask, but you don't have to ask formally. We are moved by intents. We start our days, we have intents that are being projected, and intents, when they are guided towards goodness, they become prayers in themselves. Whether you think that is a prayer or not, it is a prayer. And that's what people need to understand. To pray is not just to stop and to ask for. Prayer is actually a way of living, a way of thinking, and a way of acting.
Wow. I love that, and I wish I was recording that, because I have a 12-year-old in the house that'd be a perfect answer for the question she asked. I'm going to do my best to paraphrase, though. Our next question comes from Kirsten. She wants to know, she asks, could you talk about mediumship and the role it plays in mental health, please? Who'd like to tackle that one? Should we start with Dan on that one? He's been quiet for a few minutes.
Oh, Kirsten, to answer her own question, please.
Yeah,
She's
it's
the
a
most
miracle that Dan's
appropriate
been
for
quiet
that.
too. Yeah, I think it really depends on how you define mental health, right? But I am really glad that our society is now paying more attention to mental health this day. I think we have awakened to the importance of health in the mental space. And when that is the case, I think mediumship has to do absolutely all the time with mental health. It's not only about the mental health of those who we are trying to help, but our own. And being aware of our thinking process and what's happening over here, because we know that whatever happens over here translates everywhere else in our bodies, in our acts, in our behaviors, that everything starts with thought, right? And so mediumship plays an amazing role in mental health, because it allows us to both seek help and offer help, and also obtain tons of wonderful information about how the brain works and how it affects our feelings and emotions in general. So I think we briefly touched this here before too, right? And today, even the cases in which there are perhaps causes that are still unknown to medicine as it is today, as it pertains to mental health and trauma and all these kind of different manifestations, mediumship can also help shed light there too. So it's very important that we understand that some manifestations of mental health can be connected with mediumistic phenomena, but at the same time, the information that we have, that we obtain through mediumship, can help us attain a better perspective towards life, and therefore improve our mental environment up here. And one of the things, for instance, that we don't often think about, but when we realize that we are spiritual beings, and Spiritism brings us loud and clear, right? Mediumship shows us that loud and clear. Then shouldn't that also start to dissipate some of the angst, some of the anxiety we have about the world around us? Because if we begin to understand that we are creatures of God, right? That we were created by a divine and kind and benevolent entity out there, then we also have to understand that we're being watched over for, and that we're going to be okay. That even if we have challenges in our lives, we're going to be able to overcome them, even if it's not the way that we want them to be overcome, right? So that knowledge and that awareness and that proof that we have obtained through mediumship also should help us calm our bodies and our minds and anxiety that we feel about everyday life, if we take time to meditate and think about this, right? And to kind of piggyback on what Flavio was talking about before, and Josara and Susanna, we have to make space to listen, not only to the spirits, but to ourselves too, right? That's also mental health. And so there's a beautiful psalm, Psalm 46, I think, that says, very poetic, says, "Be still and know that I am God." Right? For you to know that there is God, to feel it, you have to be still. You have to calm yourself down. You have to have the intentionality that Susanna was talking about, right? So I love that mediumship invites us to reflect on potential external causes to mental health issues, which are very valid, and we're beginning to learn more and more in Spiritism about that, but also to invite us to make time to communicate up with our mentors and guides, which in turn help our mental space, help clean up the garbage that we build there for ourselves, that we keep there, because we're not easy on ourselves either, right? We're not oftentimes easy on ourselves, but that moment of prayer, the moment of connection, that's also mediumship. That moment of intuition and thinking about your higher self as a spiritual being is also a moment of mental health. And funny enough, I say this sometimes, it's somewhat funny, but not really. Sometimes I wonder if we spend more time brushing our teeth in this lifetime than actually praying and thinking about ourselves as spiritual beings. Now, brushing your teeth is very important, don't get me wrong, right? But shouldn't we also dedicate some time for that mental health, for that meditation, from that reflection about who we are and why we're here, and to remind ourselves on the certainty that God is there for us and that we are here for each other? So I think all of that is part of a larger mental health that we're learning. And I'm really excited that Spiritism has so much to add in that area, understanding the relationship between people to people, but also understanding how the spiritual world might influence our thoughts and therefore our actions. And which all leads to that simple call that we've been echoing here, right? It's important for us to know ourselves, to be able to distinguish where those thoughts are coming from. And that only takes place when we self-examine and we become more self-aware. So I love that mediumship has so much to do with it. I love that we can understand it. And I love that we can all practice it a little bit more, right? And then I toss it over to my smarter friends here in the panel to see what else they want to add.
I love the brushing the teeth comment. If you think about it, right, 1 hour of our day is 4% of our day, right? If we spent 4% of our day studying the gospel, the medium's book, or just connecting and meditating, I often wonder how much more at peace I would be. So I love that idea. How much time do we spend brushing our teeth compared to connecting? Any other thoughts on this topic before we go on to Jeffrey's question? No? All right. Well, Jeffrey asks, can you describe an intervention that your center provided to help a discarnate spirit? What were the presenting problems and how were they addressed and or resolved?
Hi, Jeffrey. How are you doing? Yeah, this is also a very complex answer because there are so many different situations depending on how the spirit presents itself. But one thing that we have to keep in mind is what is really truly the aim, objective of the mediumship meeting in terms of this dialogue that we develop with the discarnate. Right, because when a discarnate presents themselves and we are there and we are engaging into this dialogue, into the conversation that we will develop with the spirit, depending on the situation the spirit is I think the example that Susanna gave, it was wonderful in terms of assessing your entrance in a hospital, right? What is your status and how can we help? But the main thing is to think that we are not there to provide an immediate solution. Very much like here on earth, if I have a problem and I go to you to talk to you for you to help, solve my problem, perhaps you can have some hints and give me some hints and some ideas on how I can go through this or that way. But in fact, the whole thing takes a while. So we normally are talking about a 10, 15-minute dialogue with the spirit that has been suffering from a kind of disappointment, frustration, trauma, sometimes from many, many incarnations. But just the idea of being heard, of receiving some words of kindness, it's enough to help the spirit. So in a way, we have to keep clear that we are not there necessarily to solve their problems, because we would love to solve ours, right? And it takes so long sometimes for us to resolve our own problems. So we are not there to solve their problems, but to show that we are there, that there is a way, that they are loved, that they are children of God, and that they are heard by someone who really and truly wants to, work with them in a fraternal way. So this is the main goal, and this is what we should keep in mind. If we go with the expectation that we are going to solve their problems, we're in for disappointment, because it's very much therapy in this world. You don't go to one session of therapy and everything is resolved. You have sometimes to go through decades of therapy. So it's the same thing when we are talking about the spirit world. But just this first contact, this first idea is enough for them to start thinking about taking a different path.
Well, maybe that's why therapy's never worked for me. Just sorry. I didn't go back the second time. I'm kidding. Hey, we have did anybody else want to touch on that? Or are you ready for Alejandra's question?
I just want to add, I think I totally agree with Susanna, of course. And I think the most powerful intervention that we offer is to listen without judgment. And how wonderful the world would be if we could take this practice outside of our mediumship groups, which is, one of the greatest challenges that we have, is how we practice our spirituality confined to places, confined to circumstances, confined to dates. There's a date for gratitude. There is a special date where we take the extra care with our energies, with our fluids, so that we can be at the mediumship group. And the idea is that it would be wonderful if we could take that mentality and make each day a mediumistic day, because the reality is that we are mediums everywhere. We're dealing with spirits everywhere. We are spirits. We tend to forget that, and we live this dichotomy of like, okay, I'm going to go now deal with the spirits. Well, hello, you are dealing with spirits absolutely every day.
Every day.
And I'm still to find a more powerful intervention other than listening to someone, because a lot of times that's what the spirits really need. They need to say it. They're carrying tremendous amount of pain and guilt and sorrow for so long, and they need a compassionate soul that can embrace that sorrow, that can sit with them. And it's not much what we say, is the embrace. It is to be there for someone and to say, I'm here with you, you're not alone on this. And that sets the stage for the true intervention. The true intervention comes afterwards. The spirits are the ones who are going to actually do the major work. We are just there to, a lot of times, for that first moment that prepares for what comes after. And I think that's because a lot of pressure, like Ju was saying, to think that we are going to be there to solve anything. But I think that step, it's a very significant step that we can do, because these spirits have a difficult time. Sometimes they're so stuck in their issues, in one problem or one major circumstance, that it's not that it's impossible, but they have a difficult time feeling their mentors and the higher spirits. So that's where we come handy with our material reality to be there for them and to facilitate the process that is about to start.
And Jeffrey, I think, I also read in Jeffrey's question a certain curiosity about clear outcomes, right, of those mediumistic meetings. And Jeffrey, I could be making an assumption here. But I appreciate that sense of discovery. I think all that these ladies have talked about is exactly spot on and is the main reason for all these things. But if you want more specific examples, right, we can give you some kinds of cases that sometimes get helped. So you have a sense of the impact of a team coming together to help working with spirituality. You know, a constant in our mediumistic meetings in many different places is this rescue work, is this help with the spiritual world. And a lot of the work that takes place sometimes is of this sharing this awareness that folks who have passed, who are discarnate, they are no longer in the physical body. And so sometimes they attain themselves to realities and events here in the physical world, especially the moment of their death. And they continue to relive it at times because they feel that that's it, there's nothing else. And sometimes through dialogue and through counseling and through prayer and the intercession of our spiritual realm, we're able to help that spirit, that mind, that discarnate, understand that they are no longer here and therefore free themselves from that traumatic moment. And when that happens, it's a really beautiful thing because now they open themselves to the idea that they're spirit and that they no longer need to be attached to people and circumstances that they were here that were traumatic for them. So, you know, if you watched different movies, sometimes these things get dramatized, but the ability to invite somebody to consider that they don't need to get stuck in that moment in time, that they can free themselves from that reality that they are stuck in, whether it's a moment that they're passing or a difficult moment in their life, can be a really powerful one.
Wonderful.
If I could add 30 seconds to what Dan just mentioned, there's
Please.
also those relationship issues, right? That, you know, somebody, opens up in a spiritual world and, is aware that this incarnation happened, but still holds some grudges, still holds some, very, visceral sentiments about an individual, and it's looking for revenge, and it's looking for some, desperation act. It's looking for something, and through those meetings, right, through the counseling, through the conversation, right, that person is really meant to, is really given to the awareness that it's not worthwhile pursuing that, right? What's really important for us to do is to pursue our own enlightenment, our own evolution, right, our own evolvement, as opposed to going after somebody that's still here. There's a lot of those relationship, tales that happen in those leadership meetings as well.
So true. Thank you for that extra 30 seconds. That was awesome. We have a, what's that?
I speak fast.
I am looking. I think we answered Alejandra's question. Well, let's revisit this. It looks like there may be a bit we could go deeper on this. Could you explain what mediums did wrong in past lives that now they have this opportunity? Could you explain that a little bit deeper, please? And
yeah,
go ahead.
I think I mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the ostensive mediumship is usually a tool for us to really atone a previous mistake or a previous wrongdoing, right? Of course, we cannot speak about a particular individual, right? We don't have the history on that, but usually, right, that's a tool for us to really atone a past mistake or a past wrongdoing. But my dear friend Dan here would say that aren't our lives all for us to atone a previous mistake or previous wrongdoing? Yes, that is true as well. So that's, in a nutshell, what I wanted to say here. It's very difficult to know, but nevertheless, right, it is an important tool for us to overcome that issue that we built to our own selves.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. We're all here to improve somehow, right? Mediums are no exception. And Kardec does give us a little hint, though. He makes a beautiful argument, and he says, if you cannot find the cause of your challenges in this current life, then they must necessarily come from a previous one. So while we don't have a rule fast and loose on why that happens, why you're a medium and so forth, if you take some time to be still and listen to yourself and what is it that you have to deal with and what you find your challenges to be, you might get a good idea of what are some of the things that you have done in the past that you now need to atone for or make up for or address through new action, right? So it's sometimes very good, people. We got to go back to this, right? Sometimes it's good that we don't remember what we've done. It would not help us to move forward. It is a blessing not to remember. You don't need to know what you've done to move forward. You can just move forward if you really want to.
In that same sense, right? No, real quick. In that same sense, then, this is our best version. The version that we have right now in our lives, this is our best version, right? The other versions before, we had a lot more issues. So let's just leave it like that.
And that's why I don't dwell that much in the past, because the question would be, what haven't I done wrong? Right? So we did it all. Everything that we can think about, we did it. So, but now, it's like it's the growing process. Like a child, we are not going and to pay attention to that. We understand that everything is a result of the lack of knowledge, the lack of understanding. That's why it is so beautiful when we think about reincarnation, when we think about having this extraordinary tool that can bring us so much enlightenment, so much love, so much understanding in our life, so many opportunities of being of help, and being given to us as a possibility for us to pave a different road, not like the ones we had in the past that we don't want to look anymore. Now we want to see this paved road with beautiful and wonderful things that we can do. And the mercy and the possibilities that we receive from on high, from God, in terms of being capable of developing ourselves, of going through this process of spiritual growth through service, through this communication and emotions that we can exchange with between both sides of life.
Wonderful. We are at our time, but if there's any other parting thoughts that any of you missed or that you really want to add, I'd ask you to do that now. So just I'll pause for a moment. Any final thoughts? No. Okay. Well, I want to thank each of you for your expertise, for your knowledge, and most importantly, your love and care for your fellow spirits. I have goosebumps from just this short time we've had together, and I feel better connected to my mission and being more focused. So, guys, thank you from my heart. Love what you shared, and I love your dedication to this cause. Sincerely, thank you so much. So I'll pass it back over to Peter as we conclude for the day. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Mike.
You are muted.
Pardon me, I was muted. Thank you, everybody who participated in these hours of learning. And thank all of you for your thoughtful questions. What a great opportunity for us to get to know more about mediumship. And remember, you can always go back and watch this event again. Before we end this first day of the symposium, let's conclude with a prayer. Marcia Tragiano will join us again to do the final prayer. Marcia?
Thank you, Peter. And as we come close to our event ending today, I appreciate this opportunity to take this moment to do this closing prayer. And with that, I invite all of us to center ourselves, closing our eyes. And as we breathe in, take this opportunity to once again open our hearts and our minds to all the spirits of lights who are here present with us, and along with our benefactors who guide us during our journey on earth. Let us thank for all the blessings that we receive today. As we come to the end of our time together, and with a deep sense of gratitude, we thank all of you presenters, those who helped with the meeting, as well as all of those who assisted, who watched it. May all the thoughts and words of wisdoms shared here today stay with all of us. May the blessings we receive today touch all of us so that we can put empathy, compassion, knowledge into our daily lives. And may all of us be strengthened to become the instrument of love and charity. So be it.
Thank you, Marcia. Remember, tomorrow we resume our symposium at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Join us. There will be one more talk, a youth panel, and the program Spiritism Ask Me Anything. It is not too late to submit your questions. See you tomorrow and have a wonderful evening.